The credit card terminal beeped 3 times. Declined. Elena Cruz felt the heat crawl up her neck as the waiter's polite smile tightened. Across the table, Daniel Wright reached for his wallet, his expression unreadable. This was supposed to be their first date, a chance to feel normal again after years of survival mode. Instead, it became the moment that would either end everything before it started or prove that some connections run deeper than money ever could. If you want to see how a declined card led to the most honest love story you'll ever hear, stay until the end. And let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Hit that like button and let's begin. Daniel Wright had learned to measure his life in increments of exhaustion. There was the bone-deep weariness that came from coding until 3 in the morning, the desperate fatigue of chasing investors who always seemed one meeting away from saying yes, and the particular emptiness that settled in when he realized he'd eaten cereal for dinner 3 nights running because he'd forgotten to grocery shop again. At 31, he'd become intimately familiar with all the different flavors of tired. The Portland rain drummed against his apartment window with the relentless consistency that defined the Pacific Northwest. Inside, the glow from his laptop screen cast harsh shadows across the cramped living room that doubled as his home office. Lines of code scrolled across the monitor, his education tech platform that was supposed to revolutionize how kids learned math. Revolutionary, the early investors had called it. Visionary. That was 2 years ago, back when vision felt like enough. Now, it just felt like another thing he was failing at. "Daddy, I can't sleep." Daniel's fingers froze over the keyboard. He turned to find his daughter standing in the hallway, her small silhouette backlit by the nightlight shaped like a smiling moon. Mia was 6 years old, with dark curls that refused to be tamed and eyes that saw too much for someone so young. She clutched her stuffed rabbit against her chest, the one with the missing ear that she refused to let him replace. "Bad dream, sweetheart?" Daniel minimized his work windows and held out his arms. Mia patted across the floor, her bare feet making soft sounds against the hardwood. She climbed into his lap, fitting herself against him with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this countless times. "Not a bad dream. Just thinking." "About what?" "About if you're sad." The words hit him harder than they should have. Daniel wrapped his arms around her, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo. "I'm not sad when I'm with you, never with you. But you're sad other times." He couldn't lie to her. Mia had inherited his inability to accept easy answers, his need to dig until she found truth. It was one of the things he loved most about her, and the thing that scared him most. Because how do you explain to a 6-year-old that sometimes being a grown-up means carrying weight you can't put down? "Sometimes grown-ups get worried," he said carefully. "About work stuff, about making sure we can pay for things. But that's my job to worry about, not yours." "Uncle Marcus says you need to go on dates." Daniel closed his eyes. Of course Marcus had said something. His best friend had the subtlety of a freight train and the persistence of water-eroding stone. "Uncle Marcus talks too much." "He says you're lonely. Are you lonely, Daddy?" The question caught in his chest. Was he lonely? He hadn't allowed himself to think about it in those terms. Loneliness felt like an indulgence, something people with time and energy got to feel. He'd been too busy surviving since Sarah left 3 years ago, too focused on making sure Mia had everything she needed, even when it meant he had nothing left for himself. "I have you," Daniel said, kissing the top of her head. "That's all I need." "But Uncle Marcus says..." "Uncle Marcus is going to find himself sleeping on the porch if he keeps putting ideas in your head." Daniel tickled her ribs gently, earning a giggle that made his heart expand. "Now come on, back to bed. School tomorrow." He carried her down the narrow hallway to her room, which was barely big enough for her twin bed and the bookshelf overflowing with picture books and chapter books she was just starting to read on her own. Daniel had painted the walls lavender because it was her favorite color, had hung glow-in-the-dark stars across the ceiling in constellations he'd looked up to make sure he got them right. This room was proof that even when he was failing at everything else, he could still give her this, a space that felt safe and loved and hers. "Will you read to me?" Mia asked as he tucked her in. "Just one chapter. It's late." She handed him the book from her nightstand, a fantasy novel about a girl who discovered she had magic powers she didn't know how to control. They were on chapter 7, at the part where the main character realized that her greatest weakness might actually be her greatest strength if she could just learn to see it differently. Daniel read until Mia's breathing evened out and her grip on the rabbit loosened. Then he sat there a moment longer in the dim glow of the nightlight, watching her sleep. This was the only time his mind ever truly quieted, when he could see her safe and peaceful, when he could believe for just a moment that he was doing something right. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Daniel eased himself out of the chair and stepped into the hallway before checking the message. Marcus, did you download it yet? Daniel, no. Marcus, lying liar who lies. Check your phone. I put it on there when you weren't looking. Daniel opened his apps, and sure enough, there it was. The dating app with its cheerful heart-shaped icon mocking him from the screen. He should delete it. He had no business trying to date when he barely had time to sleep, when his company was hemorrhaging money, when every spare moment belonged to Mia or the endless grind of trying to build something from nothing. But his thumb hovered over the icon instead of the delete button. 3 years since Sarah had walked out, unable to handle the reality of motherhood, unwilling to sacrifice her freedom for the messy, exhausting reality of raising a child. 3 years of birthday parties where he was the only parent, of school conferences where teachers looked at him with pity, of nights like this when the silence in the apartment felt like it had weight and teeth. Maybe Marcus was right. Maybe he was lonely. Daniel opened the app. The profile creation felt invasive and awkward. What photos did he even have of himself that weren't 5 years old or didn't include Mia? He finally settled on one Marcus had taken at a company picnic last summer. Daniel squinting into the sun, hair windblown, wearing a t-shirt that said, "I turn coffee into code." It wasn't flattering, but it was honest. Bio. Single dad, startup founder, excellent at making terrible jokes and slightly burned grilled cheese. Looking for someone who understands that free time is a theoretical concept and that sometimes dinner is cereal. 6-year-old daughter is the best thing that ever happened to me. Everything else is negotiable. He almost deleted it 3 times before hitting submit. Then he set the phone face down on the coffee table and went back to his laptop, trying to focus on the code that would either save his company or prove that he'd wasted 2 years of his life chasing a dream he couldn't afford. The notifications started within minutes. Daniel ignored them, disciplining himself to finish the feature he'd been building. But when he finally gave in and checked, scrolling through the profiles of women who all seemed to have their lives together in ways he couldn't imagine, one face stopped him cold. Elena Cruz, 29. Her main photo showed her in a bakery kitchen, flour dusting her dark hair, wearing an apron that had clearly seen better days. She wasn't posing or trying to look sultry. She was laughing at something off camera, her whole face lit up with genuine joy. The other photos were just as unfiltered. One of her holding up a collapsed cake with a caption that read "Nailed it." Another of her covered in what looked like chocolate ganache, grinning like a kid. Her bio was short. Baker. Messy kitchen enthusiast. I believe in second chances, real conversations, and the healing power of good bread. Family means everything. Life is too short for fake anything. Something about her face, about the authenticity radiating from every photo, made Daniel's chest tighten. She looked like someone who understood that life was complicated and messy and hard, but who hadn't let that kill the light in her eyes. She looked real in a way that made everyone else's carefully curated profiles seem hollow. His finger hovered over the like button. What was he doing? He had nothing to offer someone like her. No time, no money, no romantic track record that didn't end in abandonment. He should close the app, delete it, focus on the disaster that was his actual life. But he thought about Mia asking if he was lonely. He thought about the years stretching ahead of him, an endless cycle of work and responsibility, and trying to be enough for his daughter while the parts of himself that needed connection slowly withered away. He liked her profile. Then he set down his phone and went back to coding, trying not to think about it, trying not to hope. The match notification came through while Daniel was wrestling Mia into her rain jacket the next morning, already running late for school drop-off. He barely glanced at it before shoving his phone in his pocket and hustling his daughter out the door into the relentless Portland drizzle. "Daddy, you forgot my lunch," Mia called from the back seat of his aging Honda Civic as he pulled out of their apartment complex. Daniel's head dropped against the steering wheel. Are you sure? I put it in your backpack. That was yesterday's lunch. I didn't eat the carrots, so I brought them home. Remember? He didn't remember. The days blurred together into an exhausting montage of tasks and deadlines and moments he should have been paying closer attention to. Okay, we'll stop and grab you something. Can I have the donut with sprinkles? Absolutely not. You'll have something with actual nutritional value. But Daddy, Mia rose right. We've talked about this. She sighed with the weight of someone who'd been oppressed her entire life. Fine, but I want the yogurt with the gummy bears in it. Deal. They stopped at the corner store where Daniel grabbed an overpriced yogurt cup while Mia pressed her face against the bakery case, eyeing the forbidden donuts. The cashier rang them up with the bored efficiency of someone who'd seen too many harried parents making emergency breakfast runs. Back in the car, racing against the clock, Daniel's phone buzzed insistently in his pocket. He ignored it through drop-off, ignored it through the drive to his co-working space, ignored it until he was settled at his desk with his third coffee of the morning and the weight of everything he needed to accomplish pressing down on his shoulders. Elena. Hi, your profile made me smile. Free time as a theoretical concept is the most relatable thing I've read all week. Daniel stared at the message, his heart doing something complicated in his chest. She'd actually messaged him. This beautiful woman who looked like she understood something essential about life had chosen to reach out. He typed and deleted 4 different responses before settling on something that felt honest. Daniel. Thanks. It's either laugh or cry, and laughing requires less cleanup. Your collapsed cake photo is incredible. Please tell me there's a story there. The 3 dots appeared almost immediately, then disappeared, then appeared again. Daniel found himself holding his breath. Elena. There's always a story. In this case, it involved me getting distracted by a grease fire in the oven next to mine, forgetting that cakes don't actually pause their baking process when you're not looking, and learning that apparently there's a such thing as overmixing. The bakery owner was very understanding after she stopped laughing. Daniel, I once deployed code that crashed our entire platform because I forgot to test what would happen if someone entered a negative number for their age. Turns out 12-year-olds think it's hilarious to claim they're 500 years old. Elena. Please tell me you kept those responses. That's comedy gold. They messaged throughout the day, quick exchanges between his coding sessions and her shifts at the bakery. Daniel learned that she worked at a small artisan bakery in Southeast Portland, that she'd grown up in a big family and still sent money home to help her younger siblings, that she believed dessert was a food group, and that anyone who said otherwise was lying to themselves. She learned that he was building an app to help kids who struggled with math, that his daughter was the center of his universe, that he survived on coffee, and the vague hope that eventually things would get easier. The messages felt easy in a way Daniel hadn't experienced in years. There was no pretense, no careful presentation of his best self. Elena asked real questions and seemed genuinely interested in his answers. When he mentioned being exhausted, she didn't offer platitudes or try to fix it. She just said, "Yeah, tired is basically my default setting these days. I've started rating my days by how many times I consider just lying down on the floor." By the end of the week, they were texting every night after Mia went to bed. Long, wandering conversations about everything and nothing. She told him about her dream of opening her own bakery someday, about how she was saving every spare dollar even though it felt impossible. He told her about the investor meeting that had fallen through, about how he was starting to wonder if he was delusional for thinking he could actually build something that mattered. Elena. You're not delusional. You're brave. Do you know how many people have dreams and never even try? You're actually doing it. Daniel, I'm failing at it. Elena. You're learning. That's different. Something about her refusal to let him wallow, combined with her obvious understanding of what struggling actually meant, made Daniel feel seen in a way he hadn't in years. This wasn't someone offering advice from a place of comfort. This was someone in the trenches with him, fighting her own battles, choosing optimism as an act of defiance rather than ignorance. 2 weeks after they matched, Daniel finally worked up the courage to ask the question that had been building in his chest. Daniel, would you want to get dinner sometime? Somewhere cheap because I'm broke, but somewhere we can actually talk? The three dots appeared and disappeared so many times he started to panic. Had he misread everything? Was she just being nice to the sad single dad who clearly needed a friend? Elena: I would love that. Fair warning though, I'm also broke. Like genuinely can't remember the last time I bought something that wasn't on sale, broke. So cheap is perfect. They agreed on a small Italian place in his neighborhood that had reasonable prices, and more importantly, a corner booth where they could talk without shouting over the noise. Daniel arranged for Marcus to pick up Mia from school and keep her overnight. Finally, Marcus had crowed. The hermit emerges from his cave. The day of the date, Daniel changed clothes 4 times before settling on dark jeans and a button-down shirt that was only slightly wrinkled. He arrived 15 minutes early and spent the time parked outside the restaurant giving himself a pep talk that felt increasingly pathetic. You're an adult, he muttered to his reflection in the rearview mirror. You can have a conversation with another adult without completely embarrassing yourself, probably. His reflection looked skeptical. Elena arrived exactly on time, hurrying through the rain in a yellow raincoat that made her look like a beam of sunshine breaking through Portland's perpetual gray. She saw him through the window and waved, her smile bright enough to make his nervousness retreat a few degrees. Inside, shaking off rain, she was even more beautiful than her photos. Not in a polished, intimidating way, but in a way that felt warm and approachable. She had flour in her hair. Occupational hazard, she laughed, brushing at it, and her hands had small burns and scars that spoke to years of working with hot ovens and sharp knives. Hi, Daniel said, standing awkwardly by the booth. Hi yourself. Elena slid into the seat across from him, her eyes sparkling with humor. You look terrified. Should I be offended? No, I haven't done this in a while, like a long while. My last date was in 2019, and it ended with me getting called away because my daughter ate a penny and we had to go to urgent care. Did she survive the penny? It passed without incident. The relationship didn't. Elena laughed, a genuine sound that filled the space between them with warmth. Well, I promise I have no intention of eating any currency. My worst date story is the guy who brought his mother. Not mentioned it beforehand, just showed up with her and then got mad when I didn't want to continue the date with her sitting there judging my appetizer choices. Please tell me you ordered the most expensive thing on the menu out of spite. I ordered 3 desserts and insisted we split them. His mother did not approve. They fell into conversation as easily as they had over text, maybe easier. Daniel found himself telling her about Mia with the unfiltered honesty he usually reserved for Marcus. The hard parts along with the beautiful ones. How he was terrified every day that he wasn't enough. That his daughter would grow up and realize she deserved better than a dad who was always tired and stressed and failing to build a stable life. Elena listened without judgment, her eyes soft with understanding. Can I tell you something? Mia is lucky. Not because you're perfect or because you have it all figured out. Because you're trying. Because you show up. My dad worked 3 jobs when I was growing up. And you know what I remember? Not that we were poor. Not that he was exhausted. I remember that he came to every single school play, even if he had to leave work early. I remember that he taught me to bake even though his shifts started at 4 in the morning. The trying is what matters. How do you stay so optimistic? Daniel asked. After everything you've told me about your life, how do you still believe things will work out? Who says I believe that? Elena's smile turned wry. I wake up most days convinced I'm one disaster away from complete collapse. But I get up anyway. I go to work anyway, I save my dollars anyway, because what's the alternative? Giving up? That feels worse. The waiter appeared with their entrees, spaghetti for him, ravioli for her, both chosen more for affordability than preference. They shared bites off each other's plates without awkwardness. The gesture feeling natural in a way that surprised Daniel. This was what he'd forgotten in the years of survival mode. That connection could be easy. That being with another person didn't have to be work. They talked about their families. Elena described growing up as the oldest of 4, the weight of being the responsible one, the one everyone turned to when things got hard. She sent money home almost every paycheck to help her youngest brother stay in community college, even though it meant she could barely cover her own rent some months. Do you resent it? Daniel asked carefully. Taking care of everyone? Elena considered this, twirling her fork through her ravioli. Sometimes. Is that terrible? I love my family. I'd do anything for them. But sometimes I just want to be selfish, to save for my own dreams instead of always being the backup plan. That's not terrible. That's human. What about you? Do you ever resent it? Being a single parent? Daniel shook his head immediately. Never. I resent Sarah for leaving. I resent that Mia has to grow up wondering why her mother didn't want her. But raising her? That's the only thing in my life I know I'm doing right, even when I'm doing it badly. The conversation flowed through dessert. Tiramisu they split because neither could justify ordering their own. Elena told him about the bakery she dreamed of opening, describing it in such vivid detail that Daniel could almost see it. Exposed brick, mismatched furniture, a chalkboard menu that changed daily based on what inspired her. It's probably stupid, she said, looking down at her coffee. Everyone wants to open a restaurant or a bakery. Most of them fail. Most startups fail too, Daniel countered. Doesn't mean we shouldn't try. Is that what you tell yourself when you're lying awake at 3 in the morning panicking about money? No, at 3 in the morning I'm fully convinced I'm an idiot who's going to end up homeless. But in the daylight, I try to remember why I started. The check arrived in a small leather folder, placed precisely between them. Daniel reached for it automatically, but Elena's hand shot out faster. We're splitting it, she said firmly. I told you I was broke, not that you had to pay for everything. Elena, I asked you out, and I said yes. That doesn't mean you owe me a meal. There was steel underneath her warmth, a pride that Daniel recognized because he carried the same thing. She wasn't going to let him pay just because he was the man, wasn't going to accept charity disguised as chivalry. He respected that, even as part of him wanted to insist, wanted to be the one who could provide something. Okay, he said, pulling out his wallet. But I'm getting the next one. Presumptuous, assuming there'll be a next one. But she was smiling as she said it, pulling out her card. The waiter returned and ran their cards. Daniel signed his receipt, already thinking about how he'd have to juggle some payments this month to make up for the expense. But it had been worth it. God, it had been worth it to feel like a person again instead of just a collection of responsibilities and failures. Then the waiter came back, his expression apologetic as he approached Elena's side of the table. I'm sorry, miss, but your card was declined. Do you have another form of payment? The color drained from Elena's face. Daniel watched her freeze, saw her throat work as she swallowed. Her hands trembled slightly as she took the card back. Her voice came out small, humiliated. I don't understand. I should have enough. Daniel knew that feeling, the sick horror of a declined card in front of witnesses. He'd been there more times than he wanted to count. It's fine, he said quickly, pulling out his card again. I've got it. No. Elena's voice was tight. No, just give me a second. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands, checking her bank app. Daniel saw the exact moment she understood what had happened, saw her close her eyes briefly in what looked like pain. My brother, she said quietly, more to herself than to him. He needed money for textbooks. I sent it last week and I forgot to. She looked up at the waiter, then at Daniel, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I'm so sorry. I can Venmo you as soon as I get paid on Friday. Elena. Daniel reached across the table, covering her hand with his. Her skin was cold. It's okay. I've got it. It's not okay. She pulled her hand back, wrapping her arms around herself. This is humiliating. I told you I could pay my half and I can't even do that. The waiter shifted uncomfortably. Daniel handed him the card without looking away from Elena. Give us a minute, please. When they were alone, Elena wouldn't meet his eyes. She was staring at the table, her jaw clenched, and Daniel recognized the look. It was the same one he wore every time Marcus tried to help him financially. Every time his parents sent money he couldn't bring himself to refuse, but couldn't accept without shame. Pride wasn't just about refusing help. It was about the story you told yourself about who you were, and a declined card rewrote that story in ways that hurt. Look at me, Daniel said softly. I can't. Please. She raised her eyes, and he saw the vulnerability there, the fear that he was judging her, that this moment had ruined everything before it had a chance to begin. Last month, Daniel said, I had to choose between paying my electricity bill and buying Mia new shoes because she'd grown out of her old ones. I chose the shoes. Marcus paid my electricity bill, and I cried about it in my car for 20 minutes because I felt like such a failure. Elena's expression shifted slightly, some of the shame giving way to surprise. 2 weeks ago, he continued, I used a gas station as my office because I couldn't afford the co-working space and needed the Wi-Fi. I bought a single coffee and sat there for 6 hours pretending I belonged. Why are you telling me this? Because I need you to know that I understand. Not in a theoretical way, not in an, oh, that must be hard way. I understand in the way of someone who's been there, who's still there. And this, he gestured at the check, this doesn't change anything. It doesn't make you less. It makes you human. It makes me look like I can't take care of myself. Well, it makes you look like you love your brother enough to give him money you need. That's not weakness, Elena. That's the opposite. She was quiet for a long moment, and Daniel let her be. The waiter had left the signed receipt. Daniel had added a generous tip because he remembered working service jobs and how much those moments of grace meant. He could afford to skip a few meals this week. He'd done it before. I really wanted this to go well, Elena finally said, her voice small. It is going well. I just humiliated myself in front of you. You showed me who you are, someone who takes care of the people she loves even when it costs her. I already knew that from our messages. This just proved it. Elena finally met his eyes fully, searching his face for judgment and seemingly finding none. You mean that? I mean that. You're not secretly thinking I'm a disaster? I'm openly thinking you're a disaster. I'm also thinking you're beautiful and funny and real, and that disasters are significantly more interesting than people who have everything figured out. The smallest smile tugged at her lips. You're kind of weird, you know that? I've been told. In a good way. In a, I can't believe you're not running screaming way. Daniel stood, offering his hand. Come on, let's get out of here. Elena took his hand and he pulled her to her feet. They walked out into the rain together, standing under the awning while the downpour created a curtain of water around them. The streetlights reflected off the puddles, turning the ordinary Portland evening into something almost magical. I'm buying next time, Elena said firmly. And there will be a next time, even if you've now seen me at my most pathetic. Impossible. I once cried in a pitch meeting because the investor asked about my 5-year plan, and I realized I could barely see 5 weeks ahead. You're going to have to work much harder to out-pathetic me. Is that a challenge? It's a promise that we're all disasters, and anyone who pretends otherwise is lying. Elena laughed, the sound bright against the rain. Then she did something that surprised them both. She stepped closer and kissed his cheek, quick and gentle. Thank you for not making me feel small. Daniel's heart hammered against his ribs. Next time you buy ice cream, nothing fancy, just ice cream. Deal. They stood there a moment longer, neither wanting to be the first to leave, before Elena finally pulled out her phone to call a rideshare. Daniel waited with her until her car arrived, watching her wave from the back seat as it pulled away into the rainy Portland night. He drove home slowly, his mind replaying every moment of the evening. The declined card felt less like an ending and more like a beginning, a moment of truth that had stripped away the possibility of pretense. They'd both seen each other clearly now, and neither had looked away. His phone buzzed as he pulled into his apartment complex. Elena. Made it home. Thank you again for tonight, and not just for dinner. For making me feel like being broke and exhausted doesn't mean I'm failing at life. Daniel. Same to you. Get some sleep. Dream about fancy bakeries and unlimited ingredient budgets. Elena. Dream about apps that change the world and investors who actually say yes. Daniel. Deal. Good night, Elena. Elena. Good night, Daniel. He sat in his car for a long moment before heading inside, letting himself feel something he'd almost forgotten was possible. Hope. Not the desperate, grasping kind that came from needing something to work out. The quiet kind that whispered that maybe, just maybe, good things could still happen to people who were tired and struggling and doing their best. Marcus was waiting in his apartment with Mia asleep on the couch, both of them covered in what looked like the remains of an intense blanket fort construction project. So? Marcus whispered, careful not to wake her. How did it go? Daniel looked at his sleeping daughter, at his best friend who'd dropped everything to help him have one night of possibility, at his cramped apartment that was all he could afford but was filled with love anyway. "It went," he said simply. But he was smiling as he said it, and Marcus was smart enough not to push for more. Some things were too new, too fragile, too precious to put into words yet. Some things needed to be protected in the quiet spaces of your heart until they grew strong enough to survive the light of day. Daniel carried Mia to her bed, tucking her in with practiced care. Then he returned to his laptop, to the code that waited patiently for his attention, to the dream he was still chasing despite every rational reason to quit. But for the first time in longer than he could remember, he wasn't thinking about failure while he worked. He was thinking about a woman with flower in her hair who understood what it meant to keep trying even when trying felt impossible. He was thinking that maybe he wasn't as alone as he'd believed. And that small shift, that tiny opening in the armor he'd built around his heart, changed everything that came after. The ice cream date happened on a Tuesday afternoon, which was the only time their schedules aligned in the 2 weeks following that first dinner. Elena had a rare day off, and Daniel had arranged to work from a coffee shop near Mia's school so he could handle pickup. They met at a small ice cream parlor that prided itself on unusual flavors and reasonable prices, the kind of place that survived on neighborhood loyalty rather than Instagram appeal. Mia held Daniel's hand as they walked in, her curiosity about this woman her father kept texting barely concealed. She'd been asking questions all week, the kind of questions that made Daniel realize his daughter was far more observant than he gave her credit for. "Is she your girlfriend?" Mia had asked that morning, while Daniel attempted to make her hair into something resembling a braid. "She's my friend," Daniel had answered carefully. "We're getting to know each other." "But do you like her? Where did you even learn that phrase?" "Uncle Marcus. He says you smile at your phone now, and it's weird." Daniel had made a mental note to murder Marcus. Slowly. "I smile at lots of things. Not like this. You smile like when I bring home good grades, like you're proud but also surprised," out of the mouths of terrifyingly perceptive children. "Eat your breakfast, sweetheart." Now, watching Elena wave from a corner table, Daniel felt that same complicated smile tugging at his lips. She'd beaten them there and already ordered 3 cups of ice cream waiting, one clearly child-sized with rainbow sprinkles. "You must be Mia," Elena said as they approached, her voice warm but not overly enthusiastic in that way some adults got around kids, like they were trying too hard. "Your dad talks about you constantly." Mia regarded her with the solemn assessment of a 6-year-old who knew she was important. "He talks about you too. He said you make bread." "I do. I also make cookies and cakes and pastries. Do you like to bake?" "I don't know. Daddy always burns things." "Hey," Daniel protested, sliding into the booth. "That was 1 time. Okay, 3 times. Fine. I'm a terrible cook, but that's why I ordered pizza so often." Elena laughed, pushing the sprinkle-covered cup toward Mia. "Cotton candy ice cream. I took a guess based on the sprinkles preference your dad mentioned." Mia's eyes went wide. "That's my favorite. How did you know sprinkles were my thing?" "Your backpack." Elena pointed to the unicorn backpack covered in sparkly stickers and rhinestone embellishments. "You've got a very specific aesthetic going on. I respect the commitment." Just like that, Mia's wariness evaporated. She dug into her ice cream with enthusiasm while Elena and Daniel tackled their own choices, salted caramel for him, lavender honey for her. "Lavender?" Daniel raised an eyebrow. "In ice cream? Don't knock it until you try it." Elena offered him a spoonful, and he leaned forward to taste it. The flavor was unexpected, floral, but not overwhelming, sweet with an edge of something more complex. "Well?" "It tastes purple." "That's the best description I've ever heard. You taste purple, I'll stick with my assessment that yours tastes like apologies." "Salted caramel tastes like apologies?" "It's trying to be sweet but can't commit fully, so it throws in salt for credibility. Classic apologetic behavior." Mia giggled around her spoon. "You're funny. Daddy's friends are usually boring." Mia rose to eat. "What? Uncle Marcus just talks about computers, and Jenny only wants to talk about her cats. You're more interesting than cats." Elena grinned. "That might be the nicest compliment I've received all week. What about you? What do you like besides sparkles and cotton candy?" "Books and science. And my friend Aisha's mom is teaching us about butterflies and how they used to be caterpillars, which is basically magic if you think about it. Metamorphosis, Elena said, nodding seriously. Absolutely magical. Do you know some butterflies can remember things from when they were caterpillars, even though their brain completely reorganizes during transformation? Mia's jaw dropped. Really? That's so cool. Daddy, did you know that? Daniel held up his hands. I did not. I'm learning all kinds of things today. They talked while they ate, the conversation flowing easily between the three of them. Elena asked Mia about school and actually listened to the rambling answers, nodding in the right places, asking follow-up questions that proved she was paying attention. She didn't talk down to her or try to be a replacement for anything. She was just genuinely interested, and Mia responded to that authenticity like flowers turning towards sun. Can I go look at the flavors? Mia asked when her cup was empty, eyeing the display case with transparent longing. Just looking, Daniel warned. We're not getting seconds. I know. I just want to see what other colors they have. She skipped off to press her face against the glass, and Elena watched her go with a soft expression. She's wonderful. You're doing an incredible job. I'm doing a barely adequate job and getting lucky a lot. Stop that. Elena's voice was gentle but firm. Stop diminishing what you're doing. She's happy, curious, confident enough to be herself. That doesn't happen by accident. Daniel looked down at his melting ice cream, uncomfortable with the praise. Her mother left because she couldn't handle it. Some days I'm terrified Mia will realize she got the wrong parent. Some days I'm terrified I'll never be more than the woman who sends her paychecks home and works in someone else's kitchen. Elena reached across the table, her fingers brushing his. We all have those fears. Doesn't make them true. Before Daniel could respond, Mia returned with a detailed report on every flavor in the case, including which ones looked good and which ones looked suspicious. Elena listened with appropriate gravitas, offering her professional opinion on the suspicious flavors. The green tea is actually delicious, she said. I know it looks like it might taste like grass, but trust me on this one. Have you tried all the flavors here? Mia asked, awed. Most of them. One of my coworkers lives near here, and we come sometimes after really hard shifts. Ice cream is excellent crisis food. What kind of crisis? Mia, Daniel interjected gently, but Elena shook her head. It's okay. All kinds. Bad days at work, money stress, family stuff. Sometimes you just need something sweet to remind you that good things still exist. Mia considered this with the seriousness she brought to all new information. Daddy gives me hot chocolate when I'm sad. Is that the same? Exactly the same. Your dad's a smart guy. They left the ice cream shop as the afternoon light started to fade, the Portland sky doing its perpetual dance between clearing and threatening rain. Mia walked between them, holding both their hands, chattering about the butterfly unit at school and whether caterpillars dreamed about flying. At the parking lot where they'd both left their cars, Mia surprised everyone by hugging Elena goodbye. Will you come have ice cream with us again? Elena looked at Daniel over Mia's head, a question in her eyes. He nodded, and her smile widened. I would love that. Maybe next time I can bring some cookies from the bakery. Chocolate chip? Is there any other kind worth making? After they parted ways and Daniel had buckled Mia into her booster seat, his daughter was quiet for a long moment before speaking. I like her, Daddy. She doesn't pretend. Daniel met her eyes in the rearview mirror. Pretend what? That things are always good. Some grown-ups do that. They act like nothing's ever hard. But Elena talks about real stuff, like you do with me. Sometimes his daughter's wisdom knocked the air from his lungs. Yeah, sweetheart, she does. Are you going to keep seeing her? Would that be okay with you? Mia nodded slowly. I think so, but Daddy? Don't forget about me. The words hit like a physical blow. Daniel pulled over immediately, turning in his seat to look at his daughter fully. Mia Rose, look at me. There is nothing and no one in this world that could make me forget about you. You're my priority, always. Do you understand? But what if you fall in love with her and then you get married and have new kids and I'm not special anymore? Where is this coming from? But even as he asked, Daniel knew. Kids at school, probably. Stories about step-families and half-siblings, the complicated mathematics of love that children tried to understand with limited information. Baby, I need you to hear me. You will always be my daughter. You will always be special. If I ever get married again, and that's a big if, it would be to someone who understood that you and I are a package deal. Someone who would make our family bigger, not push you out. Okay? Mia's eyes were bright with tears. Promise? I promise. Cross my heart. She nodded, swiping at her eyes. Okay, can we get pizza for dinner? Just like that, crisis averted. Childhood resilience in action. Daniel's heart was still racing as he pulled back into traffic, but he forced his voice to stay calm. Sure thing. The usual? Extra cheese. That night, after Mia was asleep, Daniel texted Elena. Mia asked if you were going to replace her. The response came quickly. Oh God, what did you tell her? That she's irreplaceable. That anyone in my life would have to understand she comes first. Good. Because she should come first. I wouldn't respect you if she didn't. Daniel stared at that message for a long time, something tight in his chest loosening. He'd been braced for reassurance, for promises that she wouldn't get in the way. Instead, Elena had simply affirmed what he already knew had to be true. She understood the stakes without needing them explained. Want to grab coffee this week? He typed. Fair warning, it'll have to be early morning before work or late evening after Mia's in bed. My schedule is a disaster. Welcome to the bakery life. I'm up at 4 a.m. most days. Early morning works. They started meeting twice a week at a coffee shop that opened at 5:30, when the city was still dark and quiet. Daniel would drop Mia at Marcus's place. His friend had started keeping emergency overnight supplies after the third pre-dawn wake-up call, and Elena would arrive straight from opening prep at the bakery, smelling like yeast and sugar. Those morning meetings became the highlight of Daniel's week. They'd sit in the corner booth with their cheap coffee, talking in low voices while the city woke up around them. Elena told him about her childhood in a crowded house where privacy was a luxury and love was expressed through cooking. Her mother had taught her to bake before she could read, standing on a stool to reach the counter, learning measurements by feel rather than recipe. Food was how we communicated, Elena explained, wrapping her hands around her mug. My mom couldn't afford therapy or fancy family dinners out, but she could make pan dulce that tasted like home. She could teach us that creating something beautiful from basic ingredients was a kind of magic. Daniel told her about the early days with Mia, when Sarah was still around but already checking out emotionally. The fights about freedom and sacrifice, the growing realization that his partner had never truly wanted to be a mother but hadn't known how to admit it until the baby was already real and demanding. She left on a Tuesday, Daniel said quietly. Mia was 3. Just packed a bag and said she couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't be the person we needed her to be. I was so angry I couldn't see straight, but under the anger was this terrible relief because at least we could stop pretending. Do you still talk to her? She sends money sometimes, birthday cards. She's not a villain, just someone who made a choice she wasn't ready for and didn't know how to unmake without destroying herself. Daniel traced patterns in the condensation on his cup. I don't hate her, but I can't forgive her for what she did to Mia, for making our daughter feel like she was too much. Elena's hand covered his. Mia doesn't feel that way. She feels loved. That's all you. I'm terrified I'm not enough. We're all terrified of that. Doesn't make it true. The conversations weren't always heavy. Elena had a gift for finding humor in disaster, for turning her worst kitchen catastrophes into stories that left Daniel gasping with laughter. She told him about the time she'd confused salt and sugar in a wedding cake, about the apprentice who'd somehow managed to set water on fire, about the customer who'd insisted his daughter's birthday cake needed to be gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free, and taste exactly like regular cake. So basically he wanted a lie, Daniel said, a delicious, expensive lie. I made it work, but it tasted like virtuous cardboard and everyone knew it. Daniel shared his own professional disasters. The pitch meeting where his laptop died mid-presentation. The beta test where kids figured out how to hack the system to give themselves infinite points. The investor who'd fallen asleep during his demo. Actually, asleep? Elena asked, delighted. Head back, mouth open, gentle snoring. His partner kept trying to wake him subtly. It did not work. Did you get the investment? What do you think? They laughed together in the pre-dawn quiet, and Daniel realized he hadn't felt this light in years. The stress was still there. His bank account was still a disaster. His company was still struggling. He was still one crisis away from collapse. But Elena made the weight feel shareable, made the exhaustion feel less isolating. 6 weeks into whatever this was becoming, Elena invited him to the bakery after hours. "I want to show you something," she said. "Can you get away?" Daniel arranged for Mia to have a sleepover at her best friend's house and met Elena at the darkened bakery at 9 p.m. She let him in through the back door, and he followed her into the kitchen where she worked her magic every morning. "This is where it happens," Elena said, gesturing around the space. Industrial ovens, marble work surfaces, shelves lined with supplies. Everything was clean but worn, evidence of years of use. "Not glamorous, but it's mine. Sort of. I mean, I don't own it, but this is my station. It smells incredible in here. That's the bread starter. We keep it in the back." She moved through the space with practiced confidence, pulling out ingredients. "I wanted to teach you something. A peace offering for all the terrible coffee shop pastries you've been subjecting yourself to. Those pastries are fine. Those pastries are crimes against baking. Sit, watch, learn." Daniel perched on a stool while Elena worked, her hands moving with the kind of muscle memory that came from years of repetition. She was making croissants, she explained, which were labor-intensive and finicky, but worth it when done right. "The key is the butter," she said, rolling out dough with precise movements. "Too warm and it melts into the dough. Too cold and it breaks instead of creating layers. You have to feel for the right temperature." "How do you feel temperature?" "Experience failure. Making 1,000 batches until your hands just know." She glanced up at him, flour dusting her cheek. "Kind of like your coding, I imagine. At some point you stop thinking about syntax and just feel what's right." "When I'm not creating catastrophic bugs, sure," Elena laughed. "We all create catastrophic bugs. I once made a batch of cookies with baking soda instead of baking powder. They tasted like pool water and inflated like whoopee cushions." "Please tell me you served them anyway." "I absolutely did not. I threw them away and pretended the batch never happened. Some failures don't deserve to be eaten." They worked in comfortable silence for a while. Elena focused on her croissants, Daniel just watching her move through her element. There was something mesmerizing about seeing someone do what they were meant to do, the way confidence and skill transformed ordinary movements into something approaching art. "Can I ask you something?" Elena said as she folded the dough. "And you can tell me if I'm overstepping." "Ask." "What happens if the company fails? I know you're struggling. You've mentioned losing investors, running out of runway. What's the backup plan?" Daniel was quiet for a long moment. No one had asked him that directly, not even Marcus. Everyone seemed afraid to voice the possibility of failure out loud, as if speaking it might make it real. But Elena was looking at him with those steady eyes, not judging, just asking an honest question that deserved an honest answer. "I don't know," he admitted. "I've been so focused on making it work that I haven't let myself think about the alternative. I'd have to get a regular job, probably. Something stable with benefits. Give up on the dream and just try to survive." "Would that be so terrible?" "It would feel like I wasted 3 years of my life. Like I failed Mia by chasing something impossible instead of just being practical from the start." Elena set down her rolling pin and came around the work surface to stand in front of him. "Listen to me. Trying is never a waste. Even if this company crashes and burns, you tried. You built something. You learned things. That matters." "Does it matter if I end up broke and starting over at 31? "Yes, because you'll start over knowing you gave it everything. You won't spend the rest of your life wondering what if." She reached up, brushing flour from his hair that he hadn't realized was there. "I'm not saying give up. I'm saying you're allowed to have a contingency plan. You're allowed to acknowledge that trying your best and succeeding aren't the same thing." "When did you get so wise?" "When I had to accept that I might never own my own bakery, that I might be someone else's employee forever, sending money home, watching my dreams stay dreams." Her smile was sad but real. "It doesn't mean I stopped trying. It means I stopped tying my entire worth to one specific outcome." Daniel pulled her closer, resting his forehead against hers. "What are we doing, Elena?" "I don't know," Something terrifying and probably stupid. I can't offer you stability. I'm a disaster. I'm not asking for stability. I'm asking for honesty. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. Can you do that? Can you be honest with me even when it's hard? I think so. Can you? I can try. He kissed her then, soft and careful, tasting sugar and hope and fear all mixed together. Elena made a small sound against his mouth and deepened the kiss, her flour-dusted hands coming up to frame his face. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Daniel felt like something fundamental had shifted. The croissants are going to be ruined, Elena whispered. Worth it. But she was already pulling away, returning to her work with a flush on her cheeks and a smile she couldn't quite hide. Daniel watched her finish the lamination process, fold the dough precisely, set it to rest. The easy companionship had gained a new dimension now, charged with possibility and want. Come back tomorrow morning, Elena said as she cleaned up. I'll have these baked. You can try them fresh and tell me if they're worth the effort. They will be. Confident. I trust you. The words hung between them, heavier than they should have been. Trust was currency for people like them, people who'd been let down and disappointed and forced to rely only on themselves. Offering it freely was an act of faith. Elena locked up the bakery and walked with him to his car, neither ready to say goodnight. The Portland streets were quiet, rain threatening but not yet falling. They stood in the parking lot like teenagers, neither wanting to be the first to leave. I should go, Daniel finally said. Early morning with Mia. I should sleep before my 4 a.m. shift. Neither of them moved. Elena? Yeah? I'm really glad your card got declined. She laughed, the sound bright in the darkness. Only you would say something like that. I mean it. If that hadn't happened, we might have stayed surface level, all polite and careful. That moment of honesty changed everything. It was humiliating. It was real. And real is what I needed. He kissed her forehead gently. Get some sleep. I'll see you in the morning. This time he did leave, driving home through the empty streets with his heart feeling too big for his chest. His phone buzzed at a red light. Elena. For the record, I'm glad too. Good night, Daniel. Daniel. Good night. The croissants the next morning were perfect, flaky and buttery and rich, tasting like effort and care made edible. Daniel ate 3 of them while Mia had chocolate milk and Elena laughed at his lack of restraint. You're supposed to savor them, she protested. I am savoring them, enthusiastically. But the lightness was short-lived. 2 days later, Daniel got the email that confirmed his worst fears. His last remaining investor was pulling out, citing market concerns and portfolio rebalancing. The funding he'd been counting on to keep the company alive for another 6 months had evaporated. He sat in his car outside Mia's school, staring at the email, feeling his entire world contract to the size of that glowing screen. Without that money, he had maybe 6 weeks before he'd have to shut everything down. 6 weeks to find a miracle or accept defeat. His phone rang. Marcus. Did you see it? His friend asked without preamble. Yeah. What are you going to do? I don't know. Daniel's voice sounded hollow even to himself. I don't know, Marcus. I can't think. Come to my place after you pick up Mia. We'll figure something out. There's nothing to figure out. It's over. It's not over until you say it is. Come over. We'll make a plan. But Daniel couldn't make himself move. He sat there until it was almost time for pickup, his mind spiraling through scenarios and calculations, each one worse than the last. He'd have to find a job. Had to give up on 3 years of work. Had to tell Mia that Daddy's big dream was dead and they'd be starting over. He'd have to tell Elena that he'd failed exactly as spectacularly as he'd feared. His phone buzzed with a text. Pickup went okay? Mia mentioned you seemed sad this morning. Of course his daughter had noticed. Of course she'd texted Elena, because apparently they exchanged messages now, something Daniel had discovered last week when Mia casually mentioned that Elena had sent her a picture of a butterfly-shaped cookie. Bad news on the company front, he typed back. Lost my last investor. The 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times. Then his phone rang. Where are you? Elena asked. School parking lot. Stay there. I'm coming. Elena, You don't have to. I'm coming. Don't argue. She arrived 20 minutes later in her beat-up sedan, still wearing her bakery apron, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She climbed into his passenger seat without asking permission and just looked at him. "Tell me," she said. So he did. All of it. The investor pulling out, the calculations he'd been running in his head, the growing certainty that he'd wasted years of his life chasing something impossible. The words poured out of him in a rush, and Elena listened without interrupting, her hand finding his and holding tight. "I have to give up," Daniel said finally. "I have to be realistic. I have a daughter to support. I can't keep gambling on a fantasy." "Is it a fantasy? The app works. Kids love it. You have users. Not enough to monetize. Not enough to sustain a business. It's just another nice idea that couldn't make it in the real world. So make it work in the real world. Find a different path." "There is no different path. I'm out of options." Elena was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice was gentle but firm. "You're spiraling. You're catastrophizing. I recognize it because I do it too. But right now you need to pick up your daughter and be her dad. The company crisis can wait 3 hours. I can't just turn it off. You can for her. You have to." She squeezed his hand. "Go be her father. Give yourself permission to table this until tonight. Then we'll talk strategy." "We? You think I'm letting you drown alone? Not happening." She leaned over and kissed his cheek. "Go get Mia. Take her for ice cream. Be present. Then tonight, after she's asleep, call me and we'll figure out next steps together." "Why are you doing this?" "Because you do it for me. Because this is what people do when they care about each other. They show up." She climbed out of his car, pausing to look back through the window. "You're not alone anymore, Daniel. Get used to it." She drove away before he could respond, leaving him sitting there with tears threatening and something like gratitude burning in his chest. She was right. Mia needed him functional, needed him present. The collapse of his company didn't change his responsibilities as a father. He took a shaky breath, wiped his eyes, and went to collect his daughter from school. And when Mia asked if they could get French fries instead of going straight home, he said yes, even though he couldn't afford the extra expense. Because sometimes being a good father meant pretending everything was okay, even when your world was ending. Sometimes it meant saving the breakdown for after bedtime, and trusting that someone would be there to help you through it when you finally fell apart. That night, after Mia finally drifted off clutching her rabbit, Daniel sat on his couch, staring at his phone for 10 full minutes before he found the courage to call Elena. She answered on the first ring, her voice soft like she'd been waiting. "Hey, how are you holding up?" "I'm not." The admission came easier than he expected. "I've been running numbers for the past 2 hours and they don't get better no matter how many times I recalculate. I'm done, Elena. It's over." "Okay, walk me through it. What exactly are your options?" Daniel leaned back, closing his eyes. "I can keep the app running on minimal resources for maybe 6 more weeks if I cut every possible expense. That means no salary for me, no contractor help, nothing, just server costs and prayer. Or I can shut down now, try to salvage whatever dignity I have left, and start looking for a real job." "What happens to the users if you shut down?" "They lose access, all their progress gone. There are about 3,000 kids using it regularly. A lot of them are struggling learners who finally found something that works for them." His voice cracked. "I'd be abandoning them. So shutting down immediately isn't really an option. Neither is running on fumes for 6 weeks just to arrive at the same ending. I'm just delaying the inevitable and making it worse." Elena was quiet for a moment, and Daniel could hear her moving around, the sound of water running. "What if you're not looking at all the options? What if there's a middle path?" "There isn't. I've looked at everything." "Have you considered going freemium? Keeping the basic version free but adding premium features parents can pay for?" "I'd need resources to build premium features. I don't have resources." "What about grants? Educational nonprofits? You're solving a real problem for kids who need help. There has to be funding for that." "Grant applications take months. I don't have months." "Daniel?" Her voice sharpened slightly, pulling him out of his spiral. "Stop shooting down every suggestion before you've actually thought about it. I know you're scared. I know you feel like you're drowning, but you're also brilliant and stubborn, and you built something that matters. Don't let fear make you give up before you've actually exhausted every option. I'm tired, Elena. I'm so tired of fighting for something that might never work. I know, but you're not fighting alone anymore. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was gentler. Look, I can't fix this for you. I can't make investors materialize or solve your funding crisis, but I can sit on the phone with you while you make a real list of options. Not the panic list you've been running through your head, an actual strategic list of what you could try. Why are you doing this? Because someone did it for me once. When I thought I'd have to quit the bakery and move back home, when I couldn't make rent and couldn't see a way forward, my friend Carmen sat with me for 6 hours making a budget and a plan. She didn't fix it, but she made it feel less impossible. I'm returning the favor. Something in Daniel's chest loosened slightly. Okay, let's make a list. They stayed on the phone for 2 hours, Elena asking questions that forced him to think strategically instead of catastrophically. What were his actual fixed costs? What could he negotiate down? Who in his network might know someone who knew someone? What would a minimal viable version of the premium model look like? You mentioned a teacher reached out last month about using your app in her classroom, Elena said. What happened with that? Nothing. She wanted a site license but couldn't afford it. I gave her free access. What if you created a school model? Discounted rates for teachers, but actually charged them something. Even small revenue is better than no revenue. Schools don't have budgets for this kind of thing. Some don't. Some do. And some have grants specifically for educational technology. You won't know until you ask. Elena's voice was firm, patient, refusing to let him give up. Add it to the list. What else? By the time they hung up, Daniel had a document with 12 concrete actions he could take. None of them guaranteed to work, but all of them possible. It wasn't a solution, but it was a direction. And direction felt better than drowning. Thank you, he said quietly before they disconnected. I don't know what I did to deserve you showing up in my life, but thank you. You swiped right on a woman covered in flour. That took bravery. She paused. Get some sleep, Daniel. Tomorrow you start fighting back. Tomorrow I start fighting back, he repeated, trying to make himself believe it. The next 2 weeks were a blur of activity fueled by desperation and coffee. Daniel sent emails to every educational foundation he could find, reached out to the teachers who'd expressed interest, started building a bare-bones premium tier he could launch quickly. He worked 18-hour days surviving on Elena's croissants and whatever food Marcus brought over, barely sleeping but feeling more focused than he had in months. Elena became his anchor point, the person he called when the panic threatened to overwhelm him. She never told him it would definitely work out, never offered false hope. Instead, she asked practical questions, helped him think through decisions, reminded him to eat and sleep and be present for Mia. They saw each other less during those weeks, their schedules making it nearly impossible to align. But they texted constantly, little messages throughout the day that kept Daniel tethered to something beyond the crisis consuming his life. Burned a whole batch of bread thinking about pricing strategies. You're a terrible influence. Pretty sure that's your own fault. Also, what did you decide on pricing? $20 a month for premium, $50 for schools. Feels right. Trust your gut. How's Mia? Worried about me. Keeps asking if we're going to be okay. What do you tell her? That we're always okay because we have each other. I'm not sure she believes me. She believes you. Kids are resilient. You're teaching her that trying matters even when things are hard. Those texts, brief as they were, kept Daniel from completely losing himself in the work. But he could feel something shifting between them, the crisis creating distance even as it proved how much he relied on her. They were supposed to be building something together, but instead he was drowning and she was throwing lifelines from the shore. 3 weeks after the investor pulled out, Daniel got his first school sign-up, a charter school in Seattle, willing to pay for a pilot program for their struggling math students. It wasn't much money, but it was validation, proof that his model could work. He called Elena immediately, barely able to contain his excitement. Someone said yes. An actual school with an actual budget said yes. Daniel, that's incredible. See? I told you not to give up. It's not enough to save the company, but it's something. It's proof this could work. So what's next? I keep trying, keep reaching out. Maybe I can get enough schools on board to sustain basic operations until I can figure out investor funding again. He paused, suddenly aware of how long it had been since they'd actually seen each other. When can I take you to dinner, a real dinner, where we're not talking about my company or my problems? I miss you. Elena's hesitation was brief but noticeable. I miss you too. But Daniel, I need to tell you something. My hours got cut again at the bakery. They're struggling and I'm the newest hire, so I'm taking the hit. I picked up a weekend job at a coffee shop, but it's going to make my schedule even more impossible. The guilt hit him immediately. Elena, I'm sorry. I've been so wrapped up in my own crisis I didn't even ask how you were doing. You've had a lot going on. I get it. That's not an excuse. What can I do? How can I help? You can't. That's the point. We're both drowning in our own stuff right now. We barely have time to take care of ourselves, let alone each other. Her voice was tired, strained in a way he'd never heard before. Maybe we need to be realistic about what we can handle. Fear shot through Daniel's chest. What are you saying? I'm saying I care about you, a lot. But I'm exhausted, Daniel. I'm working 2 jobs, sending money home, trying to keep my head above water. And you're in crisis mode with the company. When do we actually have space for a relationship? We make space. We figure it out. How? You're working 18-hour days. I'm covering shifts at 2 different places. When was the last time we actually saw each other for more than 20 minutes? Daniel couldn't answer because she was right. It had been over a week since they'd managed coffee, and that had been interrupted by a call from Mia's school about a permission slip he'd forgotten to sign. Their relationship had become texts and phone calls, logistics and crisis management. So what? We just give up? He asked, hating how defeated he sounded. I don't know. Maybe we take a step back. Maybe we acknowledge that timing is terrible and we're both too overwhelmed to do this justice. Or maybe we decide that we're worth fighting for even when it's hard. Elena sighed, and Daniel could hear something breaking in that sound. I have to go. My shift starts in 20 minutes, and I can't be late again. Elena, wait. But she'd already hung up, leaving Daniel staring at his phone in the quiet of his apartment, feeling like he'd just lost something he couldn't afford to lose. He wanted to call her back, to fix whatever was fracturing between them. But Mia called from her room asking for water, and he had 3 emails from potential school clients he needed to respond to, and the code for the premium tier wasn't going to write itself. So he shelved his personal crisis like he shelved everything else that wasn't immediately urgent, promising himself he'd deal with it later. Later came 3 days afterward when he still hadn't heard from Elena. No texts, no calls, just silence that felt louder than any argument. Daniel tried to focus on work, on Mia, on the slow progress he was making with school outreach. But Elena's absence was a physical ache, a constant reminder of what he stood to lose. Marcus noticed during one of his check-ins, showing up with Thai food and refusing to leave until Daniel actually ate something. You look like death. When did you last sleep? I don't know, Tuesday? It's Friday, man. You can't keep doing this. I don't have a choice. If I don't make this work, you'll survive. You'll get a job. You'll take care of Mia. The world won't end. Marcus studied him carefully. This isn't just about the company, is it? Where's Elena? We're taking a step back. What does that mean? It means we're both drowning and we don't have the energy to save each other. Daniel pushed his food around his plate without eating. It means the timing is terrible, and maybe we're being realistic. Or maybe you're both scared and using busy as an excuse to avoid getting hurt. Marcus leaned forward. Daniel, I've known you for 10 years. You do this thing where you convince yourself you don't deserve good things, so you sabotage them before they can fall apart on their own. Is that what's happening here? She's the one who said we should step back. And you just accepted it? Didn't fight for her? What am I supposed to fight with, Marcus? I'm barely keeping my life together. I have nothing to offer her except more stress and more problems. You have yourself. You have the fact that she makes you smile for the first time in 3 years. You have whatever it is that made her show up at your car when you were falling apart. Marcus stood up, shaking his head. The company might fail. That's a real possibility. But if you let Elena go because you're too scared or too proud to be vulnerable, that's on you. That's a choice. After Marcus left, Daniel sat with those words, turning them over in his mind. Was he sabotaging this? Was he using the company crisis as an excuse to push Elena away before she could leave him like Sarah had? Or was he being genuinely realistic about what he could handle, about what was fair to ask of someone who was struggling just as much as he was? He didn't have answers, but he knew he couldn't leave things the way they were. He picked up his phone and typed out a message. "Can we talk, please?" The response came an hour later. "I'm working until 11. After that, I'll be up. Call me whenever." 11:15, his phone rang. Elena sounded exhausted, her voice rough like she'd been crying or maybe just hadn't slept. "Hi. Hi. I miss you. I miss you too. That's the problem." "How is that a problem?" "Because missing you doesn't change anything. You're still drowning in company stuff. I'm still working myself to exhaustion. We still don't have time for this." She paused, and he heard her take a shaky breath. "Daniel, I need to tell you something. I'm thinking about moving back home." The words hit like a punch to the gut. "What? Why?" "Because I can't make it work here. Even with 2 jobs, I'm barely covering rent. I send money home and there's nothing left. I'm tired all the time. I haven't saved a single dollar toward my bakery dream in 6 months. What's the point of staying in Portland and struggling when I could go home, live with my parents, actually save some money? The point is your life is here. Your job, your friends, my job that just cut my hours, my friends I never see because I'm always working. What life exactly am I holding on to?" Her voice cracked. "I'm 29 years old and I have nothing to show for it. No savings, no bakery, no stability. I'm exactly where I was 5 years ago, just more tired. You have me. You have what we're building together. Do we? Because from where I'm sitting, we have phone calls and texts and plans we never actually execute because we're both too busy surviving." Daniel felt panic rising in his chest. "When would you go?" "I don't know. I haven't decided anything for sure. But my lease is up in 2 months and I'm trying to figure out if I can afford to renew or if I should just accept that I can't make it work here." "Don't go. Please, Elena, don't give up." "I'm not giving up. I'm being realistic. Something you told me to be, remember? When you were talking about having contingency plans?" The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd been the one catastrophizing about his company failing, and she'd been the one telling him to consider all options. Now she was applying the same logic to her own life, and he couldn't stand it. "What if I asked you to stay? What if I said I need you here?" "That's not fair. You can't put that on me when you're barely holding your own life together. I can't be responsible for both of our happinesses." "I'm not asking you to be responsible for mine. I'm asking you not to make a huge life decision based on fear. And I'm asking you to respect that I'm exhausted and broke and trying to figure out what's actually sustainable for my life. This isn't about us. This is about me surviving." They were both quiet for a long moment, the silence heavy with everything they weren't saying. Daniel wanted to beg her to stay, to promise he'd make it work somehow, to offer solutions he didn't have. But what right did he have to ask her to keep struggling when he couldn't even guarantee his own stability? "I don't want to lose you," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't want to lose you either. But Daniel, we might not have a choice. Life doesn't always care what we want. So what do we do?" "I don't know. I genuinely don't know." She sounded as lost as he felt. "Maybe we just take it one day at a time. I haven't made any decisions yet. I'm just trying to be honest about where my head is." "Okay, one day at a time." Daniel closed his eyes, trying to breathe through the fear. "Can I see you? This weekend, can we actually spend time together? Not talking about problems or making plans, just being together. I work Saturday and Sunday both, double shifts at the coffee shop." "What about Sunday night after your shift? I know you'll be exhausted, but okay. Sunday night. We'll figure out something." They hung up with fragile promises and no real solutions, and Daniel sat in the darkness of his apartment wondering how everything had gotten so complicated so fast. 2 months ago, he'd been lonely but stable, his life predictable in its exhaustion. Now he had someone he cared about deeply who might be leaving, a company that might be dying, and a daughter who deserved better than a father who was falling apart. The next day brought another small victory. A second school signed on, this one in Portland, wanting to pilot the program with their special education students. Daniel should have been elated, but the triumph felt hollow with Elena's words echoing in his head. What good was saving his company if he lost everything else in the process? He picked up Mia from school and took her to the park, trying to be present, trying to focus on her chatter about butterflies and her friend Aisha's upcoming birthday party. But his mind kept drifting to Elena, to the possibility of her leaving, to the weight of everything he stood to lose. "Daddy, you're not listening," Mia said, tugging on his sleeve. "I'm sorry, sweetheart." "Say it again?" "I said Elena texted me a picture of cookies shaped like butterflies. She remembered I like butterflies." Mia showed him her tablet, where indeed there was a photo of intricately decorated butterfly cookies. "She's nice. I like her." Daniel's throat tightened. "I like her too, baby. Is she going to be around more? Can she come to Aisha's party with us?" How did he explain to a 6-year-old that the woman she was starting to care about might disappear from their lives? That grown-up relationships were complicated and sometimes trying your best wasn't enough? "I don't know, Mia. Elena's really busy with work right now." "You're always busy with work and you still make time for me." "That's different. You're my daughter. That's my job." "But if you love someone, don't you make time for them anyway?" Mia looked at him with those two wise eyes. "That's what you told me. You said love is about showing up even when it's hard." Out of the mouths of children. Daniel pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "You're right. You're absolutely right." That night, after Mia was asleep, Daniel made a decision. He couldn't control whether his company succeeded or failed. He couldn't control whether Elena decided to move back home. But he could control whether he showed up, whether he fought for what mattered, whether he let fear dictate his choices. He texted Elena, "I know Sunday is our plan, but I need to see you before that. Tomorrow night, after Mia's in bed, can I come over? Just for an hour. I need to say something to your face." The 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times before her response came through. "Okay, but Daniel, if this is you trying to talk me out of leaving, it's not, I promise. Just let me come over." "Okay, 9:30? I'll be there." The next evening felt endless. Daniel went through the motions of dinner and bath time and bedtime stories with Mia, but his mind was already racing ahead to what he needed to say to Elena, how to make her understand what he'd realized. At 9:15, he knocked on Marcus's door. "Emergency favor. Can you listen for Mia? I need to go see Elena, and I'll be back in an hour." Marcus looked at him carefully. "You look like you're about to do something stupid or brave. I can't tell which. Maybe both. Go. I've got her. But Daniel, don't screw this up." "I'm going to try really hard not to." Elena's apartment was a tiny studio in a building that had seen better days, but she'd made it warm with plants and soft lights and the smell of whatever she'd been baking recently. She answered the door in sweatpants and an oversized sweater, her hair damp from a shower, looking exhausted and beautiful and scared. "Hi," she said, stepping aside to let him in. "Hi." Daniel stood in the middle of her small space, suddenly unsure how to start. "Thank you for letting me come over." "You sounded serious. I was worried." She gestured to her tiny couch. "Sit?" They sat, and Daniel took her hands in his, needing the physical connection to ground what he needed to say. "I've been thinking about what you said, about moving home, about not being able to make it work here, and I've been thinking about us, about what we're doing, and whether it's sustainable." Elena's face fell slightly. "Daniel, if you're about to break up with me to make it easier, I'm not. I'm really not. Just let me finish." He took a breath, organizing his thoughts. "You were right that we're both drowning. You were right that we barely have time for ourselves, let alone each other. You were right about all of it. But you know what? I don't care." "What?" "I don't care that the timing is terrible. I don't care that we're both broke and exhausted and struggling. I don't care that this is hard because everything worth having is hard." He squeezed her hands. "When my investor pulled out, when I thought everything was over, you showed up. You didn't try to fix it. You didn't make promises you couldn't keep. You just showed up and helped me think clearly. Do you know how rare that is?" "Daniel, I'm not done. When I told you about Sarah leaving, about my fear that I'm failing Mia, You didn't coddle me or tell me I was wrong. You just sat with me in the hard truth and made it feel less lonely. When we can't see each other, you send Mia pictures of butterfly cookies because you remember what makes her happy. You're building a relationship with my daughter even though we haven't figured out what we are yet. Elena's eyes were bright with tears. Where are you going with this? I'm going toward the truth, which is that I'm falling in love with you. Maybe I already have fallen. And I know that's terrifying because we're both disasters and nothing is stable and you might move away and my company might fail. But I'd rather have this, whatever this is, for however long we get than protect myself by pretending I don't care. You're falling in love with me? Her voice was small, disbelieving. Yes, completely. Inconveniently. Probably stupidly given everything else going on. He reached up to brush away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. So here's what I'm asking. Don't make decisions about moving based on protecting yourself from getting hurt. If you need to go home for financial reasons, for your mental health, for your future, I'll understand and I'll support you. But don't leave because you're scared of what we could be. I am scared, Elena whispered. I'm terrified. Everyone I've ever counted on has let me down eventually. Either they leave, or I disappoint them, or life just gets in the way. Why would we be different? Maybe we won't be. Maybe this ends badly. Maybe in 6 months, we're both in different cities nursing broken hearts. Daniel pulled her closer. Or maybe we're both braver than we think. Maybe we fight for this even when it's hard. Maybe we prove that two struggling people can actually hold each other up instead of both drowning. You really believe that? I believe it's worth trying. I believe you're worth trying for. He rested his forehead against hers. I'm not asking you to have all the answers tonight. I'm just asking you not to give up on us because you're tired and scared. I'm tired and scared too, but I'd rather be tired and scared with you than safe and alone. Elena closed her eyes, fresh tears streaming down her face. When she spoke, her voice was shaky but honest. I'm falling in love with you too. That's why this is so scary. I can't afford to need someone this much when everything else is falling apart. Then we fall apart together. We figure it out as we go. There's no perfect time for this, Elena. There's just now and whether we're brave enough to try. She kissed him then, desperate and seeking, and Daniel kissed her back with everything he had, trying to show her through touch what words couldn't fully convey. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Elena's expression had shifted from fear to something more determined. Okay, she said. Okay, we try. Okay, but I need you to promise me something. Anything. Promise me we stay honest. Even when it's hard, even when we're overwhelmed, we tell each other the truth. No pretending things are fine when they're not. No protecting each other from reality. I promise. Brutal honesty, even when it sucks. Especially when it sucks. She kissed him again, softer this time. I'm still terrified. Me too, but at least we're terrified together. They sat on her couch for the next hour, just holding each other, not solving anything but feeling less alone in the uncertainty. Daniel told her about the school sign-ups, about the small progress he was making. Elena told him about a recipe she was developing for the bakery, about a conversation with her brother where she'd finally told him he needed to find his own funding sources instead of always relying on her. How did he take it? Daniel asked. Not well. He said I was abandoning the family, choosing my own dreams over helping them. She sighed. Maybe he's right. He's not. Setting boundaries isn't abandonment, it's survival. Tell that to the guilt. I'm serious. You can't save everyone, Elena. At some point you have to save yourself. Is that what you're doing with the company? Saving yourself? Daniel considered this. I'm trying to. I'm trying to figure out the difference between giving up and knowing when to pivot. It's harder than it sounds. Everything's harder than it sounds. At 10:30, Daniel reluctantly pulled away. I need to get back to Mia. Marcus is watching her, but I don't want to push it. Okay. Elena walked him to the door, their fingers tangled together. Sunday night, we'll actually spend time together. No crisis management, no problem solving, just us. Just us, Daniel agreed. He kissed her goodbye and drove home feeling lighter than he had in weeks, despite nothing actually being solved. The company was still struggling, Elena was still considering moving. They were still broke and exhausted and facing impossible odds. But they were facing them together now, and somehow that made all the difference. Sunday night arrived with the kind of rain that made Portland feel like it existed underwater, the steady drumming against windows creating a cocoon of sound that made the rest of the world feel distant and unimportant. Daniel dropped Mia at Marcus's place with her overnight bag and a promise to pick her up before school the next morning, ignoring his friend's knowing smirk. "Have fun. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. Use protection. Marcus, I swear. I'm just saying, when two consenting adults who are clearly crazy about each other finally get a whole evening alone." Daniel shut the door on the rest of that sentence, shaking his head, but unable to stop the smile tugging at his lips. The nervous energy humming through his chest felt foreign after so many weeks of just trying to survive. This was anticipation, hope, the fragile possibility of something good in the midst of everything hard. Elena had texted him an address that wasn't her apartment, which confused him until he pulled up to a small community center tucked between a laundromat and a closed thrift store. The building looked tired but clean, its windows glowing warm against the rain-dark evening. He found Elena waiting just inside the entrance, shaking water from her hair, wearing jeans and a sweater that looked soft enough to touch. "Hi," she said, and the shyness in her smile made his heart do complicated things in his chest. "Hi yourself. What is this place?" "A friend of mine teaches cooking classes here on weekends. She owed me a favor, so I borrowed the kitchen for a few hours." Elena took his hand, her fingers cold from the rain. "I thought we could make dinner together. Actual dinner, not crisis management coffee or stolen conversations between shifts. Just us, cooking, talking. Is that okay?" "That's perfect." She led him through the quiet building to an industrial kitchen that smelled faintly of garlic and herbs, clearly well used but meticulously maintained. Elena had already set out ingredients on one of the stainless steel counters: vegetables, pasta, cream, cheese, herbs Daniel couldn't name. "We're making carbonara," she announced. "Well, a version of it. The traditional recipe uses eggs, and I'm too tired to deal with that level of precision tonight, so we're doing a cheater's version with cream. Italian grandmothers everywhere will judge me, but they're not here and we are." Daniel shed his jacket, rolling up his sleeves. "I'm warning you now, my cooking skills max out at grilled cheese and scrambled eggs, and I burn those regularly. That's why I'm here, to prevent casualties and possible food poisoning." She handed him a knife and a cutting board. "You're on vegetable duty. I need that bell pepper diced small, the mushrooms sliced thin, and try not to cut yourself because I did not plan for an emergency room visit tonight." They fell into an easy rhythm, Elena giving instructions while Daniel followed them with more enthusiasm than skill. She moved around the kitchen with the same fluid confidence she brought to the bakery, completely in her element, while he fumbled his way through basic knife work and tried not to feel completely inadequate. "You're thinking too hard," Elena said, coming to stand beside him. "Cooking isn't about perfection, it's about feel, about trusting your instincts." She placed her hands over his, guiding the knife through a bell pepper with smooth, even strokes. "See? Just like that. Relax." Having her body pressed against his back, her hands directing his movements, made it very difficult to relax in the way she meant. Daniel was acutely aware of her warmth, the vanilla and flower scent that clung to her skin, the way her breath stirred his hair when she spoke close to his ear. "Are you even listening?" she asked, laughter in her voice. "Absolutely not." Elena laughed and stepped back, leaving him immediately missing her proximity. "Fine. Finish those vegetables while I get the pasta water going, and try to focus on not injuring yourself." No promises. They worked in comfortable silence for a while, the kind of quiet that didn't need filling, punctuated only by the sounds of chopping and water boiling, and Elena humming something under her breath that might have been in Spanish. Daniel watched her move through the space, noticed the way tension gradually drained from her shoulders, how the exhaustion that had been etched into her features for weeks seemed to ease slightly. "This is nice," he said quietly. "Just being here with you. No agenda, no crisis. Just cooking." Elena looked up from the pot she was stirring, her expression soft. "Yeah, it really is." She hesitated, then added, "I forgot what this felt like. Being with someone and not feeling like I had to perform or prove anything, just existing together. Have you been in a lot of relationships where you felt like you had to perform?" Most of them, honestly. I was always the responsible one, the one who had her life together even when I didn't, the one who took care of everyone else's needs and pretended I didn't have any of my own. She turned back to the stove, her voice quieter. It gets exhausting, being what other people need instead of who you actually are. Daniel set down his knife, giving her his full attention. What do you need, Elena? Right now, what do you actually need? She was quiet for a long moment, stirring the pasta sauce with more focus than necessary. When she finally spoke, her words came slowly, carefully, like she was testing them out. I need to stop sending money home every single paycheck. I need to save for my own dreams instead of funding everyone else's. I need to stop feeling guilty for wanting things for myself. She looked up at him, vulnerability naked in her eyes. I need to be allowed to be selfish sometimes without feeling like I'm abandoning my family. That's not selfish, that's self-preservation. Tell that to my mother, or my brother, or the voice in my head that sounds exactly like my father saying family always comes first. Daniel moved around the counter to stand beside her, gently taking the spoon from her hand and setting it aside. Look at me. When she did, he continued, your family raised someone who's so loyal and generous that she gives until there's nothing left. That's beautiful. But it's also not sustainable, and they're wrong to expect it from you indefinitely. You're allowed to have boundaries. You're allowed to choose yourself. Am I? Because every time I try, the guilt eats me alive. Then we work on the guilt. Together. Because I've spent 3 years feeling guilty for every choice I make, convinced I'm failing Mia no matter what I do. I understand that particular brand of torture. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. But maybe we can help each other remember that taking care of ourselves isn't the same as abandoning the people we love. Maybe we can be each other's reality check when the guilt starts lying. Elena leaned into his touch, closing her eyes briefly. How are you so good at this? At saying exactly what I need to hear. Because I need to hear it too. We're mirrors for each other, I think. Same wounds, different circumstances. She opened her eyes, reaching up to cup his face. I'm still scared. Of this, of us, of what happens if we really try and it doesn't work. Me too. But I'm more scared of not trying. Elena kissed him then, slow and deep, and filled with all the words they were still learning how to say to each other. Daniel wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her closer, letting himself sink into the moment without thinking about tomorrow, or next week, or all the ways this could still fall apart. The timer on the stove beeped, pulling them reluctantly apart. Elena laughed, slightly breathless, and turned back to rescue their dinner before it overcooked. They plated the pasta with less grace than she probably would have preferred, but it tasted better than anything Daniel had eaten in weeks, creamy and rich and seasoned perfectly, the kind of comfort food that felt like a hug from the inside. They ate sitting on the counter because the dining tables were all stacked against the wall, swinging their legs like kids and talking about everything except the hard things. Elena told him stories from her childhood, growing up in a house where meals were chaotic and loud and filled with so much love it spilled over into every interaction. Daniel talked about Mia's latest obsession with butterflies, the questions she asked that he had no idea how to answer, the way she was starting to notice that other kids had mothers and she didn't. What do you tell her? Elena asked. When she asks about Sarah? The truth, as much as I can make age appropriate, that her mother loves her but couldn't be the parent she needed to be. That sometimes people make choices that hurt the ones they love, not because they want to cause pain, but because they're trying to survive. Daniel pushed pasta around his plate. I don't villainize Sarah. I can't. Because someday Mia might need a relationship with her mother, and I won't be the one who poisoned that well. That's remarkably mature for someone who has every right to be bitter. Oh, I'm bitter. I'm incredibly bitter. But that's my damage to work through, not Mia's burden to carry. He looked up at her. Do you want kids? Someday, I mean. We've never talked about that. Elena was quiet for a moment, considering. I think so? I always assumed I would, but I've watched my siblings have kids and seen how hard it is, especially when money's tight. I'm not sure I could handle that stress on top of everything else. She met his eyes. Does it matter to you? For us, I mean. You already have Mia. I don't know. I never thought I'd date someone again, let alone think about more kids. But I think what matters more is that we're honest about what we want. That we don't just drift into assumptions and then resent each other later for not meeting expectations we never articulated. So we're doing this? Having the serious conversations about the future, even though we've only been together 2 months and everything's a disaster? Seems like the exact right time, actually. Better to know now if we're fundamentally incompatible than discover it 3 years in when we're even more invested. Elena smiled, shaking her head. You're so practical, it's almost romantic. I'm a 31-year-old single dad with a failing startup. Practical is all I've got left. That's not true. You've also got stubbornness, terrible jokes, and an apparently unshakable belief that things can work out despite all evidence to the contrary. Unshakable is generous, more like desperately clinging to hope with my fingernails. They cleaned up together, washing dishes side by side in companionable silence. Elena showed him how to properly clean a cast iron pan, horrified when he tried to use soap. They argued playfully about the correct way to dry wine glasses, about whether mushrooms belonged in carbonara, about nothing that mattered and everything that did, because it meant they were building shared experiences and private jokes and the foundation of something that might actually last. When the kitchen was spotless and there were no more tasks to hide behind, they stood facing each other in the empty space, suddenly shy again. I don't want the night to end, Elena admitted, but I have to be at the bakery at 4:30 tomorrow, and you need to pick up Mia before school. I know, reality is incredibly inconvenient. Maybe we could just sit for a while. There's a couch in the common room. We could talk, or not talk, just be together until we absolutely have to leave. Daniel took her hand, threading their fingers together. Lead the way. The common room was small and slightly shabby, with mismatched furniture that had clearly been donated over many years. But the couch was comfortable enough when they settled into it, Elena tucking herself against Daniel's side with her head on his shoulder. He wrapped his arm around her, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, feeling her gradually relax against him. Tell me something true, Elena said softly. Something you haven't told anyone else. Daniel thought about it, sorting through the truths he carried. Sometimes I resent Mia. Not her specifically, but what she represents. The end of my freedom, the responsibility I can never put down, the way my entire life has to revolve around her needs. He felt Elena tense slightly against him. I feel horrible about it. I love her more than anything in the world. I would die for her without hesitation. But sometimes I see my friends who don't have kids, who can just decide to take a weekend trip or pursue an opportunity without factoring in childcare and school schedules and all the logistics of another human life, and I'm so jealous it makes me sick. That doesn't make you a bad father, doesn't it? No, it makes you human. Loving someone doesn't mean you don't occasionally feel the weight of that love. Elena shifted to look up at him. I resent my family sometimes too. All the money I send home, all the sacrifices I make because I'm the responsible one. I love them desperately, but part of me wishes I could just be selfish and say no and keep my money for myself. Have you ever said no? Once. My sister wanted money for a vacation, and I told her I couldn't afford it. She didn't speak to me for 2 months. Elena's laugh was bitter. The lesson was clear. Say yes or lose the relationship. That's manipulative. That's family, at least mine. She settled back against his chest. Your turn. Ask me something. Why baking? Out of all the things you could have chosen to pursue, why that? Elena was quiet for so long Daniel thought maybe she wasn't going to answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. When my dad got sick, cancer, when I was 16, he couldn't work anymore. Money was so tight we were eating rice and beans most nights, and even that was a struggle. But my mom would bake these elaborate cakes for other people's celebrations, quinceañeras and weddings and anniversaries. She'd stay up all night decorating them, creating these beautiful things we couldn't afford to eat ourselves. She paused, and Daniel held her tighter, feeling her fighting tears. I asked her once why she did it, why she spent hours making cakes for strangers when we could barely feed ourselves. And she said, because people need beauty even when life is ugly, especially then. I can't give them health or money or solutions, but I can give them something sweet to celebrate their joy, and that matters. She sounds incredible. She is. She taught me that creating something beautiful for other people isn't frivolous or indulgent. It's a kind of service. It's saying you deserve sweetness, you deserve celebration, Your happiness matters enough for me to spend hours making it tangible. Elena wiped at her eyes. So when I bake, I'm not just making food. I'm making moments of joy in the middle of people's ordinary days. I'm creating the thing my mother taught me matters most. The reminder that life is worth celebrating even when it's hard. Daniel kissed the top of her head, his own throat tight. When you open your bakery someday, that's what you should put on the sign, that message, that philosophy. If I open a bakery, that's still a pretty big if. When? I'm choosing to believe when. He tilted her face up to look at him. Your turn. Ask me something hard. What happens if the company actually fails? Not the maybe it will, maybe it won't. What happens if you try everything and it still doesn't work? Daniel had been avoiding thinking about this directly, but he owed Elena honesty. I get a regular job, probably at a tech company, doing coding work that pays well but doesn't mean anything. I put Mia in a better school, maybe move to a bigger apartment. We have stability, and I slowly die inside, knowing I had a chance to build something meaningful and couldn't make it work. That's dramatic. That's honest. I'm not built for regular employment. I've tried it. I'm terrible at office politics and tolerating inefficiency and pretending to care about corporate goals that don't actually matter. I lasted 2 years at my last job before I couldn't take it anymore and started building my own thing. So you'd be miserable but stable. Basically. But Mia would have what she needs, which is the point. Elena sat up fully, turning to face him with intensity in her eyes. What if there's another option? What if you're so stuck on all or nothing thinking that you're missing the middle path? What middle path? What if the app doesn't have to be your full-time job right now? What if you got contract work to pay the bills and built the company on the side until it's actually sustainable? She grabbed his hands. Daniel, you're burning yourself out trying to force something that isn't ready yet. Maybe it needs more time to grow. Maybe you need to give yourself permission to build it slowly instead of betting everything on immediate success. That feels like giving up. No, it feels like being strategic. It feels like saying this matters enough to do it right instead of rushing it because you're desperate. She squeezed his hands. Think about it. If you had a stable income and could build the app in your spare time, you'd have breathing room. You could make better decisions instead of panicked ones. You could actually enjoy the process instead of being terrified every day that you're about to lose everything. Daniel wanted to dismiss the idea immediately, but something in her words resonated. Wasn't that exactly what he'd suggested she do with her bakery dream? Save and plan and build toward it instead of rushing into something she wasn't ready for? I'd feel like I failed, he said quietly, like I couldn't make it work the way I wanted. Or you could feel like you adapted, like you found a sustainable path instead of burning out. Elena moved closer, her knees touching his. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to tell my family I can only send money every other month instead of every month. I'm going to start saving for my bakery even if it means saying no sometimes. We can both stop the all-or-nothing thinking and find middle paths that actually work for our lives. You're really going to set boundaries with your family? I'm terrified to, but yes, because you're right that I can't save everyone. And if I keep giving everything away, I'll have nothing left for myself or for us. She cupped his face gently. We can do this together. Be each other's accountability. Remind each other that sustainable is better than spectacular burnout. Daniel pulled her into his lap, holding her close while his mind raced through the implications of what she was suggesting. It felt like surrender and relief all at once, the acknowledgement that he'd been fighting the wrong battle. Maybe success didn't have to look like he'd imagined it. Maybe it could be quieter, slower, more intentional. Okay, he said finally. Okay, let's try it. I'll look for contract work, something flexible that pays well. And I'll keep building the app on the side, but without the panic of needing it to support us immediately. Elena pulled back to look at him, eyes shining. Really? You're not going to fight me on this? I'm too tired to fight you on this, and you're making too much sense. He kissed her softly. Thank you for seeing what I couldn't see, for refusing to let me self-destruct. That's what partners do. They see clearly when the other person can't. The word partners settled between them, significant and terrifying and exactly right. That's what they were becoming, not just people who cared about each other, but actual partners who showed up for the hard conversations and challenged each other's destructive patterns and chose to build something sustainable instead of something that would burn bright and die fast. They sat together on that shabby couch, talking until Elena's phone alarm reminded her that 4:30 would come brutally early and she needed at least a few hours of sleep. Daniel walked her to her car through the rain, both of them already dreading the separation but lighter than they'd been in weeks. "I'm really doing this," Elena said as she unlocked her door. "Setting boundaries with my family, saving for my dreams. It's terrifying. I'll be there while you do it, every step. And I'll be there while you find contract work and figure out a sustainable pace, every step." They kissed goodbye like teenagers, unable to pull apart, the rain soaking them both while they stood in the parking lot ignoring everything except each other. Finally, reluctantly, Elena climbed into her car. "Call me tomorrow?" she asked through the open window. "I'll text you before you even wake up." "That's 4:30 in the morning." "I know, worth it." She drove away smiling, and Daniel watched until her taillights disappeared into the rain before heading to his own car. The drive to Marcus's place felt different than it had earlier. Less anxious, more hopeful. Something had shifted tonight, some fundamental understanding that they were allowed to choose differently than they'd been choosing, that survival didn't have to mean sacrifice. Marcus was still awake when Daniel arrived, reading on the couch while Mia slept in the guest room. He took one look at Daniel's face and grinned. "Good night?" "Really good night." "You two figure your stuff out?" "Working on it, making plans that actually might be sustainable instead of just desperately hopeful." "Look at you, being all mature and strategic." Marcus stood, stretching. "Mia was great. We made friendship bracelets and she taught me about butterfly metamorphosis in excruciating detail. Did you know some butterflies can remember being caterpillars?" "Elena told me that on our first date." "She's a keeper, man. Don't screw it up." "Working on that too." Daniel carried his sleeping daughter to the car, her arms instinctively wrapping around his neck, even in sleep. This was his life. Late nights and early mornings, responsibilities that never paused, love that demanded everything he had to give. But now there was Elena too, someone who understood the weight because she carried her own version, someone who saw him clearly and chose him anyway. At home, tucking Mia into bed, Daniel whispered promises she couldn't hear, that he'd find the middle path, the sustainable way, that he'd stop treating every choice like life or death and start treating them like the incremental steps they actually were, that he'd let himself be happy instead of just constantly bracing for disaster. In his own bed, checking his phone one last time, he found a message from Elena time-stamped 20 minutes ago. "Made it home. Can't stop thinking about tonight. About us. About all the scary, wonderful possibilities ahead. Sleep well." Daniel typed his response carefully. "Same. All of it. We're going to figure this out, together." Her reply came immediately despite the late hour. "Together. I like the sound of that." So did he. For the first time in months, maybe years, Daniel fell asleep not worrying about everything that could go wrong, but imagining everything that might actually go right. The changes didn't happen overnight, but they happened. Daniel landed a contract position with a healthcare tech company 2 weeks after that conversation with Elena, doing back-end development work that paid nearly twice what he'd been scraping together from his startup. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd spent 3 years avoiding exactly this kind of stable employment, and now it felt like breathing room instead of surrender. He structured his days carefully. Contract work from 9 to 5, picking up Mia from school, dinner and homework, and bedtime routines. Then 2 hours each night building his app with the kind of focused attention he couldn't manage when panic was driving every decision. The pace was sustainable in a way desperation never had been. Elena made her own difficult changes. She sat down with her family on a video call and explained, voice shaking but determined, that she could only send money home every other month. The conversation went exactly as badly as she'd feared. Her mother's disappointment, her brother's accusations of selfishness, her sister's cold silence. But she held firm, and Daniel was on her couch when she hung up, catching her when the tears finally came. "I feel like the worst daughter in the world," she sobbed into his shoulder. "You're not. You're setting boundaries so you don't completely burn out. That's healthy." "Tell that to my guilt." "Your guilt is lying to you. Give it time." Time helped, though not quickly. Elena's mother eventually called back, apologizing for her initial reaction, admitting she'd relied too heavily on her oldest daughter because it was easier than having hard conversations with her other children. Her brother took longer to come around, but eventually sent a text acknowledging that he needed to figure out his own financial situation instead of depending on his sister. It wasn't perfect reconciliation, but it was progress. With money she wasn't sending home, Elena started saving. $50 one month, $75 the next. Amounts that felt simultaneously insignificant and revolutionary. She opened a separate savings account specifically for her bakery fund and made Daniel promise not to let her touch it except for genuine emergencies. Define genuine emergency, she'd said, only half joking. Life or death? Literally nothing else. What if there's a really good sale on commercial mixers? Not life or death, try again. They fell into a rhythm over the following months that felt both ordinary and miraculous. Tuesday nights became their standing date night, even if that just meant takeout on one of their couches after Mia went to sleep. Weekends involved Mia more often than not, the three of them developing their own traditions. Saturday morning farmers market visits where Elena taught Mia about seasonal produce. Sunday afternoon park trips where Daniel pushed both of them on the swings until his arms ached. Mia bloomed under the attention, her initial wariness of Elena transforming into genuine affection. She started asking when Elena would be coming over, requesting her butterfly cookies for special occasions, casually mentioning when Elena lives with us, in a way that made both adults exchange panicked glances over her head. We should probably talk about that, Elena said one night after Mia was asleep. The trajectory here, what we're building toward. Daniel looked up from his laptop where he'd been reviewing code for his app. What do you want the trajectory to be? I don't know. I do know, but it terrifies me. We've only been together 6 months. 7, if you count from our first date. 7 months is still not very long to be thinking about moving in together or meeting each other's families or any of the serious stuff. But you were thinking about it. Elena tucked her legs under her on the couch, worrying the hem of her sweater. I think about it constantly. I think about waking up next to you every morning instead of just the nights you can stay over. I think about teaching Mia to bake in a kitchen we share. I think about building a life instead of just dating. She looked at him directly. But I also think about how fast my last relationship moved and how badly it ended when reality didn't match the fantasy. Daniel closed his laptop, giving her his full attention. Tell me about that. You've never really talked about your past relationships. Because they're embarrassing. I have a pattern of choosing men who need saving, then exhausting myself trying to fix them, then feeling shocked when they leave anyway. She laughed without humor. There was Miguel, who was going to be a musician but needed me to support him financially while he found his sound. There was David, who had anxiety so severe he couldn't work, couldn't leave the house, couldn't function without me managing every aspect of his life. And there was Ryan, who seemed stable until I realized he expected me to be his mother, his therapist, and his maid while contributing nothing except criticism. I'm sorry, that sounds exhausting. It was. And the thing is, I kept telling myself I was being loving and supportive, but really I was just choosing people who would never challenge me to be better because they needed me too much to risk losing me. Elena met his eyes. You're different. You don't need me to save you. You're handling your own stuff. But that also means you could leave if this stops working, and that's terrifying in a completely different way. Daniel moved to sit beside her, taking her hand. I could leave. You could leave. That's the risk of choosing someone who's actually whole instead of broken. But Elena, that's also what makes this real. We're choosing each other every day, not out of desperation or need, but because being together makes our lives better. Does it make your life better? Immeasurably. You make me laugh when I'm stressed. You call me on my catastrophizing. You love my daughter without trying to replace her mother. You remind me that building something sustainable is better than burning bright and flaming out. He squeezed her hand. You make me want to be the kind of person who keeps showing up even when it's hard. Elena's eyes were bright with tears. You do the same for me. You support my boundaries with my family instead of telling me to just give in. You believe in my bakery dream when I can barely believe in it myself. You see me as a whole person with my own needs instead of just someone who exists to serve everyone else. So what are we afraid of exactly? That it might actually work? Maybe. Is that crazy? No, it's human. Daniel pulled her closer, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. How about this? We don't decide anything tonight. We just keep doing what we're doing, and when we're ready to talk about next steps, we talk about them. No timeline, no pressure, just two people building something good and seeing where it goes. That sounds reasonable and mature, and nothing like my usual relationship pattern. Good. Your usual relationship pattern clearly needed an upgrade. They sat together in comfortable silence, Elena's head on his shoulder, both of them lost in thoughts about futures they were still too scared to fully articulate. Outside, Portland rain created its familiar symphony against the windows, the sound that had become the backdrop to their entire relationship. Daniel's app continued growing slowly but steadily. The school contracts expanded. 5 schools, then 8, then 12. The revenue wasn't enough to live on, but it validated the model, proved that he'd built something people actually wanted and would pay for. He started getting inquiries from educational foundations, interest from grant programs, even a tentative conversation with a small investor who specialized in education technology. This is different from before, the investor, a woman named Catherine Chen, said during their video call. You've got real traction now, paying customers, a sustainable model. Before you were asking me to bet on potential. Now I'm betting on proof. The investment wasn't huge, but it was enough to hire a part-time developer and invest in some infrastructure upgrades. More importantly, it meant Daniel could start imagining a future where the app actually became his primary income instead of just a side project he was passionate about. He called Elena immediately after signing the paperwork, unable to contain his excitement. She was at the bakery but stepped outside to talk, and he could hear her genuine joy through the phone. Daniel, that's incredible. I'm so proud of you. I almost gave up. If you hadn't talked me into finding the middle path, I would have shut everything down months ago. But you didn't. You adapted. You found a way forward. She paused. This calls for celebration. What are you doing Friday night? Besides the usual dad stuff? Nothing. Why? Because I'm taking you and Mia out for a proper celebration dinner, my treat, and before you argue, I've been saving and I want to do this. Let me celebrate your success with you. Daniel felt his throat tighten with emotion. Okay, yes, that sounds perfect. Friday night found them at a modest Italian restaurant, the same one where they'd had their first date 9 months earlier. Mia was thrilled to be included, dressed in her favorite purple dress with sparkly shoes, chattering excitedly about a science project on butterflies she was planning. Elena had brought a small cake she'd made at the bakery, chocolate with buttercream frosting, and "Congratulations, Daniel," written in careful script across the top. You made this? Mia breathed, eyes wide. It's so pretty. I did, and after dinner we're all having a piece to celebrate your dad's big accomplishment. What did Daddy accomplish? Daniel explained in 6-year-old terms about how his app was going to help lots of kids learn math, about how someone had decided to invest money to help him make it even better. Mia listened with the kind of serious attention she gave to important things, then nodded decisively. That's good. You work really hard, Daddy. You deserve good things. Out of the mouths of children, Daniel had to blink back tears, overwhelmed by the simple truth of his daughter's faith in him. He'd spent so long convinced he was failing her, falling short, not measuring up. But she saw none of that. She just saw her father, who showed up every day and loved her fiercely, and was now being rewarded for his persistence. The dinner was relaxed and happy, filled with laughter and easy conversation. Mia entertained them with elaborate stories about her classmates, complete with dramatic reenactments. Elena asked questions that showed she was genuinely interested, not just humoring a child. Daniel watched them interact, watched his daughter lean into Elena's attention with the kind of trust that couldn't be forced or faked, and felt something shift in his chest. This was his family. Not the traditional structure he'd once imagined with Sarah, but something built from honesty and effort and choosing each other daily. This was what mattered. After dinner, walking to their cars with Mia skipping ahead, Elena caught his hand. Can I ask you something? Always. What are you thinking about? You've been quiet since we left the restaurant. I'm thinking about how much I love you, both of you. The words came out easier than he expected, natural as breathing. I'm thinking about how I want this to be my life. Not just Friday nights and stolen hours, but actually building something permanent together. Elena stopped walking, turning to face him fully. The parking lot lights cast shadows across her face, but he could see her eyes shining. Daniel, I'm not asking you to move in tomorrow. I'm not proposing. I'm just saying I know what I want, and I want you. I want us to be a family, messy and complicated and real. I want to wake up next to you and argue about whose turn it is to make coffee and teach Mia to bake together and build toward futures we're both dreaming about. I want that too, Elena whispered. I'm terrified of it, but I want it. Good. Fear means we're paying attention, that we know this matters. He pulled her closer, aware of Mia watching them from near his car with barely contained curiosity. We don't have to decide everything tonight, but I needed you to know that this isn't temporary for me, that I'm all in. Elena kissed him, quick and sweet because they had a 6-year-old audience, but full of promise. I'm all in too. We'll figure out the details later. Later came sooner than either expected. 3 weeks after that conversation, Elena's landlord informed her that the building was being sold and all tenants would need to vacate within 60 days. She called Daniel in a panic, running through increasingly impossible scenarios for finding affordable housing in Portland's brutal rental market. Everything in my price range is either in terrible neighborhoods or so small I'd barely fit a bed, she said, frustration evident in every word. I'm looking at either paying way more than I can afford or moving farther out and spending half my life commuting. Daniel took a breath, knowing he was about to suggest something that would either solve everything or create new complications. Or you could move in with Mia and me. Elena went quiet on the other end of the line. Daniel, you don't have to offer that just because I'm in a bind. I'm not. I mean, your timing is convenient, but I've been thinking about this anyway. We're together most nights anyway. You've got a drawer of clothes at my place, half your baking supplies have migrated to my kitchen, and Mia asks every morning if you're coming over. We're basically already living together, just paying for 2 apartments instead of pooling resources for one. That's practical reasoning. What about emotional reasoning? What about making sure we're doing this for the right reasons? The right reason is that I love you and want to build a life with you. The practical reasoning is just bonus logic. He softened his voice. But if you're not ready, if this feels too fast, we'll figure out something else. I don't want you to feel pressured. I don't feel pressured. I feel terrified and excited and like this is either the best decision I'll ever make or a spectacular mistake. Welcome to every major life decision ever. So what do you think? Another pause, and Daniel could practically hear her weighing options, running scenarios. Finally, yes, let's do it. Let's be terrified together. They spent the next 2 months merging their lives in ways both mundane and profound. Elena brought her furniture, her plants, her collection of baking equipment that took over half the kitchen. She and Mia decorated the guest room together, painting the walls a soft sage green and hanging fairy lights that made the space feel magical. Daniel cleared closet space, drawer space, made room for her in his life in ways both physical and emotional. The adjustment wasn't always smooth. They argued about cleaning standards, about how to discipline Mia, about money and schedules and whose turn it was to deal with various household disasters. But they also learned each other's rhythms, figured out how to navigate conflict without letting it fester, discovered that sharing space meant sharing not just the good moments, but the boring, difficult ones too. Mia adjusted better than Daniel had dared hope. She loved having Elena there for breakfast, loved the way their small apartment now smelled like baking bread on weekends, loved having someone else to read her bedtime stories when Daniel was exhausted. There were hard conversations too, about what Elena's role was, about whether Mia should call her by name or something else, about how to handle it when Mia's friends asked if Elena was her mom. What do you want me to say? Mia asked one night, sitting on Elena's bed while Elena folded laundry. When people ask about you? Elena sat down beside her, giving the question the weight it deserved. What feels right to you? I don't know. You're not my mom, but you're more than just daddy's girlfriend. You're like... Mia struggled for words, her face scrunched in concentration. You're like family. You live with us and you help take care of me and you teach me stuff, but I don't know what the word is for that. How about we say, I'm your Elena. I'm the person who loves you and lives with you and wants to help you grow into whoever you're meant to be. We don't need a label that everyone else uses. We can just define it ourselves. Mia considered this, then nodded seriously. Okay, you're my Elena, and I'm your Mia. Exactly right. It was those small moments of negotiation and definition that built the foundation of their unconventional family. Daniel watched it unfold with a kind of awed gratitude, amazed that something so good could emerge from the wreckage of his earlier life plans. 10 months after Elena moved in, nearly 2 years after their first date, Daniel's app reached a milestone that felt impossible back when he'd been desperately trying to keep it alive. 50 schools were using it. The revenue was enough that he could quit his contract work and focus on the company full-time again, but this time with actual sustainability instead of desperate hope. Catherine Chen, his investor, called to discuss expansion plans. You've built something special here. I want to talk about Series A funding, about really scaling this thing. Are you ready for that conversation? Daniel scheduled the meeting, then sat with the reality of what she was offering. This was what he'd wanted from the beginning: validation, growth, the chance to make a real impact. But he'd learned enough in the past 2 years to be wary of rushing into anything without considering the full implications. He talked it through with Elena that night, laying out the opportunities and risks. More funding meant more pressure, higher stakes, less flexibility. It meant his app would grow beyond his ability to personally manage every aspect. It meant trusting other people with his vision. "What do you want to do?" Elena asked, curled up beside him on their couch. "I don't know. Part of me wants to say yes immediately, to grab this chance with both hands. Part of me remembers how close I came to destroying myself chasing growth before I was ready." "You're ready now, though. You're not the same person you were 2 years ago. You've learned to build sustainably, to ask for help, to recognize when you're spiraling." She took his hand. "I trust you to make the right call, but I also think you should trust yourself more." "What if I fail again?" "Then you fail. But you'll fail having tried, having given it everything you had, and that's better than spending the rest of your life wondering what if." Her words echoed what she'd told him during their first crisis, and Daniel realized how much they'd both grown since then. They'd learned to hold space for each other's fears while still pushing each other toward growth. They'd learned that sustainable love meant supporting each other's dreams even when those dreams felt scary. He took the meeting with Catherine. They negotiated terms that gave him space to scale thoughtfully instead of recklessly. Within 6 months, he'd hired a small team, expanded to over 100 schools, and started getting attention from education publications as an example of edtech done right, focused on actual learning outcomes instead of flashy features. The success felt different than he'd imagined it would back when he was starting out. It was quieter, less dramatic, but also more solid. He wasn't working 18-hour days anymore. He wasn't sacrificing time with Mia or Elena for the company. He'd learned to delegate, to trust his team, to recognize that sustainable success was a marathon and not a sprint. Elena had her own victories to celebrate. 2 years after moving in with Daniel, 3 years after their first date, she'd saved enough money to start seriously planning her bakery. Not enough to open it yet, but enough to start looking at locations, developing business plans, dreaming in concrete terms instead of vague hopes. She and Daniel spent evenings at the kitchen table, her sketching layouts while he ran financial projections, both of them building toward futures they'd once thought impossible. Mia would sit with them doing homework, occasionally offering opinions on color schemes or whether the bakery should have a butterfly theme. "Everything doesn't have to be about butterflies," Elena laughed. "But butterflies are the best. They're about transformation and beauty and growing into what you're meant to be. That's perfect for a bakery." Daniel and Elena exchanged glances, both recognizing the truth in what Mia was saying, even if she didn't fully understand the metaphor she was creating. They had all transformed over these years, from scared, struggling individuals into a family that worked. Not perfectly, but persistently. The proposal happened on an ordinary Saturday in spring, 3 years and 2 months after their first date. Daniel had planned something elaborate, but when the moment came, all his careful plans evaporated in the face of simple truth. They were at the park where they'd spent so many weekend afternoons, where Elena had taught Mia to identify different plants, and where Daniel had pushed them both on swings until his arms ached. Mia was playing with friends while Daniel and Elena sat on their usual bench, watching her run and laugh with the kind of carefree joy that made all their struggles feel worthwhile. "I want to marry you," Daniel said, the words emerging without preamble or fanfare. Elena turned to him, surprise evident on her face. "What?" "I want to marry you. I want to stand up in front of our families and our friends and promise to keep choosing you every day for the rest of my life. I want Mia to know that we're committed not just to surviving together, but to actually building something permanent." He pulled a ring from his pocket, simple silver with a small stone. Nothing extravagant because they'd talked about their values around spending, but beautiful in its understated elegance. This isn't about grand gestures or perfect romance. This is about saying, I know exactly who you are, flaws and fears and dreams included, and I choose all of it. I choose us. Elena's eyes filled with tears. That's the least romantic and most perfect proposal I've ever heard. Is that a yes? That's absolutely a yes. She kissed him, laughing and crying at the same time. Yes to marrying you. Yes to this messy, imperfect, beautiful life we're building. Yes to all of it. He slid the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly, because of course it did. He'd asked Mia to help him pick it out 2 weeks earlier, and his daughter had very definite opinions about what Elena would like. Speaking of Mia, she came running over as soon as she saw them kissing, demanding to know what was happening. When they told her, her shriek of excitement could probably be heard across the entire park. Does this mean Elena is really staying forever? Forever and ever, Elena confirmed, pulling her into a hug. And we're going to be a real family? We already are a real family, Daniel said. This just makes it official. The wedding planning was simultaneously more and less stressful than either of them expected. They kept it small and intimate, focused on what actually mattered instead of trying to impress anyone. They got married in the community center where Elena had first taught Daniel to cook, the same kitchen where they'd made carbonara and fallen deeper in love. Elena's family came, her mother tearful and proud, her siblings impressed by the life she'd built for herself in Portland. Daniel's parents flew in from Arizona, his mother immediately adopting Elena and Mia into her sphere of fierce affection. Marcus officiated, because of course he did, making jokes about how he'd known they were perfect for each other from the first time Daniel had mentioned the flower-covered woman from the dating app. But the most important moment came when Mia stood between them during the ceremony, a basket of flower petals in her hands and the biggest smile on her face. Elena had asked her permission before accepting Daniel's proposal, had sat her down for a serious conversation about what it would mean to be a family in this official way. I want this, Mia had said solemnly. I want us to be together forever. You make Daddy happy, and you make me happy, and that's what families are supposed to do. Now, watching his daughter scatter petals while his soon-to-be wife smiled at him with her whole heart visible in her eyes, Daniel felt the last piece of his old fear dissolve. He'd spent so long afraid he wasn't enough, that he was failing at everything that mattered. But here was the evidence that trying had been enough, that showing up had been enough. The choosing to be vulnerable and honest and real had led to something more beautiful than he'd ever imagined. The reception was potluck style, everyone contributing dishes that meant something to them. Elena had made a simple but elegant wedding cake, chocolate with that same buttercream frosting she'd used for his celebration cake years earlier. The decorations were handmade, courtesy of Mia and several of her friends who'd taken the project very seriously. Nothing was fancy or expensive, but everything was filled with love and intention. During their first dance to a song neither of them could later remember the name of, Elena leaned close and whispered, "Thank you." For what? For not giving up. On your dreams, on us, on the possibility that things could actually work out. She pulled back to look at him. I spent so long convinced I had to choose between my own happiness and being responsible. You taught me I could have both. You taught me the same thing, that sustainable is better than spectacular burnout, that asking for help isn't weakness, that love doesn't have to be perfect to be real. They swayed together while their friends and family watched, while Mia spun in circles with other kids on the dance floor while the Portland rain created its familiar percussion against the windows. This was their life now, imperfect and sometimes messy and more beautiful than either had dared to dream. 2 years after the wedding, 5 years after their first date, Elena opened her bakery. It was small, tucked into a neighborhood that was just starting to gentrify, with exposed brick and mismatched furniture and a chalkboard menu that changed daily. The logo, designed by Mia, who was now an accomplished young artist at age 11, featured a butterfly emerging from a chrysalis, wings spreading wide. Cruz's Kitchen, read the sign outside, the name a deliberate choice to honor her mother and her heritage while also claiming ownership of her own dream. The subtitle, suggested by Daniel and immediately accepted, read, Creating Sweetness in Everyday Moments. The opening day was chaos and joy and terror all mixed together. Elena's family came, her mother crying proud tears while sampling every single pastry. Daniel brought Mia and a group of her friends, all of them dressed up like this was a formal occasion. Marcus showed up with his new girlfriend and a commitment to becoming a regular customer. Catherine Chen sent flowers and a note about believing in people who built sustainable businesses with heart. By the end of the day, Elena was exhausted and exhilarated, covered in flour as usual, her face bright with the kind of joy that came from seeing a long-held dream become tangible reality. "We did it," she said to Daniel as they locked up, Mia already asleep in the car outside. "We actually did it." "You did it. This is your dream." "No, we did it. You supported me saving for this. You helped with the business plan. You believed in it when I couldn't." She kissed him softly. "This bakery exists because you taught me it was okay to choose my own dreams. That's a gift I can never repay." "You already did. Every day you choose to stay, every time you call me on my catastrophizing, every moment you love my daughter like she's yours. You repay it. We repay each other just by showing up." They drove home through familiar Portland streets, the rain finally pausing long enough to see stars between the clouds. Mia woke up as they pulled into their apartment complex, sleepy and content, asking if she could help at the bakery tomorrow. "Tomorrow's Sunday," Elena reminded her. "Family day. The bakery is closed." "What are we going to do?" "I don't know. Something ordinary and perfect? Maybe the park? Maybe just pancakes and cartoons? We'll figure it out together." That became their motto, the phrase that guided them through challenges both big and small in the years that followed. When Mia struggled in school, when Daniel's company faced new competition, when Elena's bakery had months where revenue was too tight, when life threw its inevitable curveballs, they figured it out together. They argued sometimes, because real people in real relationships did. They got tired and stressed and occasionally snapped at each other. They made mistakes and had to apologize, had to do the hard work of repair instead of just letting resentment fester. But they kept showing up. They kept choosing each other. They kept building something sustainable instead of something that burned bright and died fast. 10 years after their first date, 15 years after Daniel became a single father, they sat on that same park bench watching Mia, now 16 and brilliant and kind, play frisbee with her friends. Daniel's app had been acquired by a larger education company, giving him the financial security he'd once desperately chased. Elena's bakery had expanded to 2 locations and won awards for best pastries in Portland 3 years running. But the real victories were quieter. Mia's easy laughter as she ran across the grass, the way Elena's hand fit perfectly in Daniel's after all these years, the life they'd built from honesty and effort and refusing to give up when things got hard. "No regrets?" Elena asked, echoing a conversation they'd had years earlier. "Not a single one. You?" "Just that I didn't swipe right on your profile sooner." Daniel laughed, pulling her closer. "Pretty sure the timing was exactly right. We weren't ready for each other before then." "True. We had to become the people who could do this first. The people who chose sustainable over spectacular." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their daughter live the kind of carefree adolescence they'd worked so hard to give her. The sun was setting, painting the Portland sky in shades of pink and gold, the kind of beauty that made ordinary moments feel sacred. This was what they'd built together. Not a fairy tale where everything worked out perfectly, but a real life where 2 broken people had learned to hold each other up. Where love wasn't about grand gestures, but about showing up day after day, choosing honesty over comfort, building something sustainable instead of settling for fleeting intensity. It wasn't the story Daniel had imagined when he'd swiped right on a woman covered in flour. It was better, messier and harder, and more real than any fantasy, filled with ordinary moments that somehow added up to extraordinary. It was a life built on the revolutionary idea that trying mattered, that sustainable was better than spectacular, and that the strongest love was the kind that chose to stay even when staying was hard. They'd both learned the same essential truth through all their struggles and victories. Love doesn't erase your problems or make life suddenly easy, but it gives you someone to face those problems with, someone who sees you clearly and chooses you anyway, someone who believes that together you can build something worth fighting for. And in the end, that was everything.